What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was rejected by his own blood but chosen by the blood moon? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The loud, bloody scream that echoed inside the Uchiha castle awakened every resident inside the house. Doors slammed open, footsteps echoed in the long hallway that led to one specific room, the bedchamber of the country's crown prince, Sasuke Uchiha. Before anyone could reach it, though, the door connecting Sasuke's room with his longtime personal guards, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, opened. A young man with tousled golden hair and summery blue eyes emerged out of the darkness, his silky blue pajamas and his childish nightcap not concealing the deadly expression in his face, a gun in a hand and narrowed eyes looking quietly around the spacious, shadowy room. When he sensed no threat, he lowered his pistol to his side, his body loosening up and the hard-hearted expression returning to its usual boyish facade. As he opened his mouth to utter a single word, the door opened with a loud crash and Sasuke's worried parents and older brother soon came pouring into the room. Royal advisors, some servants, and soldiers gathered outside the open bedroom door with worried looks on their faces. Naruto then stepped back and kept his presence hidden in the dark. Her ladyship Makoto Uchiha quickly settled beside her youngest son, who was then sitting in the middle of his black bed, face pale and cold sweat pouring from his face down to his naked upper body. Sweat glistened on his toned chest, made even more lustrous by the light of the moon that shone down the bed. "Sasuke sweetheart, are you alright?" Makoto asked, not knowing if she should touch her son or not. She knew what it was, the nightmare that had plagued her youngest son 7 years ago. The day he turned 11, he'd been continuously haunted by a nightmare. A dream he never discussed, not even to his psychiatrist. But on the 6th month of the continuous frightening vision, it halted, after he met his arranged fiancée and private minder. It never occurred again. Until now, just after his 18th summer 2 weeks ago. Sasuke brushed his hair with his finger, eyes still trained at his silken black comforter that covered his lower half. Controlling the shiver from his body, he clenched his hand and nodded to his mother. "Are you sure?" Itachi asked as he leaned on one of the bedposts, arms folded on his chests. As the eldest, the crown should have been his, but he declined. Instead, he now worked directly under the country's prime minister as the head of national defense and security. Sasuke frowned and glared at his brother. "It's just a dream," he hissed. "Right, a dream. And with your scream, you could have awakened the dead," Itachi pointed out, his mouth in a thin line. "Itachi, that's enough," Makoto warned, pulling herself up after giving her youngest son a quick kiss on his temple. "Fine," Itachi answered blandly. "Little brother's probably stressed, getting to university next week and all. Honestly, college can really be a hassle, especially when you're going to be on your own in another country." "He's not going to be on his own, Naruto's going to be there with him. And Sakura as well," Fugaku added, his voice firm but warm. "Well, I'm going back to sleep." And with that, Itachi left the room just after he dismissed the crowd gathered in the hall. Makoto and Fugaku followed behind, with a request for Naruto to stay with Sasuke for the night. When the door closed and the sound of lock clicked, the sudden quietude became eerie and only the soft breathing of the room's occupants could be heard. Naruto stepped out from the shadow and sauntered towards the window seat, settling himself on the cushion and laying his handgun on the side. His golden hair glowed as the pale moonlight cast a light from behind him, soaking his body with ethereal glimmer from the moon that passed the glass wall of window. The tick-tock of the wall clock became deafening when neither of the two refused to break the silence. For 7 years sticking with each other, 24/7, the two learned how to read each other's gesture. They knew when to keep quiet, to give comfort, to be a friend. When to be professional, distant, and calculating. When to touch, be passionate, and loving. Though one of them only knew when to love and accept nothing in return. The shifting of the bed sheets impinged through the stillness, a soft thud of footsteps following, stopping as a pair of white feet stood in front of the blonde. Naruto slowly looked up, his eyes trailing on the black sleeping pants up to the powerful toned torso and into a pair of smoldering black eyes on a sinfully handsome face. His flaxen brow furrowed, anxiety etched on his face. "Are you really fine, Sasuke?" Instead of answering, the raven-haired boy pulled Naruto to him. Sturdy arms encircled the blonde's narrow waist, red lips crushing on surprised pink ones. It was a hungry, desperate kiss and, when broken, the smaller of the two had his lips swollen from the ravage exchange. The hell bast, Naruto started, trying to free himself from the deathly grip. If he wanted, he could have easily gotten loose, but hell will freeze first before he hurt Sasuke. Relieve me, I want to forget, Sasuke whispered on the blonde's ear, and then slowly nipped small kisses down his lover's jaw and neck. Naruto wanted to say no, wanted to tell Sasuke that they should stop, but he could not. As much as his mind rejected the idea, his body and heart desired what was to come. Even in pretense, he could make believe that Sasuke loved him. The last time they had been together was on Sasuke's 18th birthday, and he had decided back then that was the last. He could no longer play the part of the Raven's UAL reliever, a role he had enjoyed for 3 years without regret. Sasuke was his first and was hoping to be his last, even though that hope would not come true, for the person he loved the most was in love with a person that deserved everything Sasuke had. Naruto cursed himself, bit his lips, closed his eyes, and accepted what his body and heart were screaming for. Clothes were discarded on the floor, moans of pleasure echoing inside the quiet room. Bodies moved together in fluid grace, tanned body arching, love marks appearing on porcelain skin, a sound of utter bliss upon climax, a whimper of names, soft pants, and tangled limbs. Sasuke's breathing started to even while still sprawled on top of his best friend, his face resting on the blonde's shoulder. From there he could still smell that unique Naruto scent of wild jasmine on summer days. A more calm expression graced his face, his dreams altogether forgotten. As always, only the blonde teen could satisfy him to an insane level. Orgasms were always mind-numbing and their touches were as hot and electrifying as those described by romantic novels his mother loved to read. 1. Naruto was not his first, it was Sakura. He was a very young and hormonal teen then. And he loved Sakura very much. Hundreds of proposals came when his father announced their intent to find him a suitable bride. It had been a custom that once a crown prince reached his 11th year, a fiancé should be announced as well. The selection was extensive and rigid, since the chosen lady would be the next queen. In the end, his mother chose the girl she deemed worthy of him, and to his pleasure, he and his betrothed had no problem being attracted to one another. Amidst being popular to ladies and even some gentlemen, Sasuke never indulged himself to flirting. He disliked overzealous girls who showered him with unnecessary devotion, but he was patient enough whenever an occasion demanded for him to be sociable. After his engagement with Sakura had been announced, he was somewhat thankful when the immature advances he received before receded, and he enjoyed the commitment more when his hormonal years arrived. But what he thought was a supposedly perfect connection turned out to be a disaster. Their first was understandable, but when he couldn't reach his climax properly on their following lovemaking, he became disturbed. His lover didn't seem to notice since she always came first, and would end up tired and sleepy without knowing he was still hard and aching. On their first 3 tries, he let it slide. But when it continued, he almost wanted to cease the act, if not, Sakura would take the initiative. From then on, making love with his fiancée became taxing when it should have been otherwise. Every single time they had, he would end up pleasuring himself just to get it over with. For Sasuke, it had become stressful. Eventually, it became traumatic. He thought he was the one who had a problem, thus, swallowing his pride, he confided to his brother about it. Though Itachi was annoying most of the time, he assisted him in every way. From secret doctor appointments, which was unnecessary after all since they didn't find anything wrong medical-wise, to his relief, to forcing him to sleep with somebody else. The people Itachi hired to sleep with him were virgins and had been thoroughly checked, eyes and hands both bound so as not to see their employer or the face of their bed partner. Itachi chose one lovely girl and an attractive boy for him, and since it was difficult for him to get hard and hot when he was not interested with the person, Itachi had forced him to take a pill to help him with that problem. Without their parents' knowledge, Sasuke tried it, for his future and for Sakura's. But just like with Sakura, he couldn't get his release. He became frustrated to the point that he avoided Sakura for months. He felt as though he was an anomaly, a freak. However, everything changed after one night with his confidant and best friend. He met Naruto the same time he was introduced to Sakura. He actually rejected the idea of having a personal bodyguard, one that would stay glued to his side every moment possible. He was independent by nature and hated to be on constant scrutiny. Yet, at the time when Naruto was presented to him, he let his parents' wish prevail. It was not because he liked him the first time, but because he would be at least around someone his own age. Despite Naruto's childlike looks and ingenuous attitude, Sasuke was aware that the boy was an A9 in elite group under the direct supervision of the Prime Minister for the country's security and protection. It was a group founded centuries ago when monarchical rule deteriorated and nobles supported the strongest family to lead the country behind the royal facade. A9 trained chosen kids from the age of 6, deployed and sent as spies or killers to other countries after passing harsh trainings and horrible trials and tests. They're the heart of the world's most fearful militia, trained assets that would never be a liability even in death. For the reason that he was the future king, the Prime Minister himself handpicked the one who would serve Sasuke, someone who would put his own life on the line just to protect him. Naruto, at the age of 10, turning 11, had been sent successfully to 3 spying and 2 assassination missions to other countries alone, including the numerous assignments he had taken with a group. The blonde was also a very close relative of the Prime Minister, and a future Commander-General of the A9 once he reached his age of reasoning. Though a big loss for the elite unit, he ended up babysitting the one person that citizens of their country revered. For the first 4 years, the blonde teen would disappear for a week or a month at most when special duty called. Most of the time, he stuck around and grew up with Sasuke like a normal child. School, homework, and other extracurricular activities took his time. Forming a deep bond and falling in love, though, came unplanned. Even though Sasuke appeared to be emotionally deficient outside, he was not naive not to discern the special feeling his best friend had. It wasn't hard for him not to notice after he became familiar with Naruto's personality for years. And he admitted as well that he had a strong feeling for the blonde assassin, yet he was still very much in love with his fiancée. Needless to say, he was aware of Naruto's feelings and the least he could do was to respect it. But respect petered out when he found out, that certain night, the night of Naruto's 15th birthday, that he could reach a mind-blowing completion with him. He thought back then that he could be with Sakura finally, only to find out later on that it was only with Naruto that he could attain it. He knew that he had taken advantage of the other teens' emotions, that he didn't deserve any of the bliss he felt every time they did it. Unfortunately, his logical mind always disregarded those thoughts when their touches became fervent and their bodies traveled to heavenly ecstasy. 1. His reverie halted when he felt something wet and warm on his cheeks. Sasuke's head moved and he planted his hands on both sides of the blonde's now crying face. Naruto's breath was uneven as he struggled to control his sobs from escaping his lips. Chewing the inside of his mouth, he forced himself to look through his long lashes and meet Sasuke's gaze. Heartbreaking blue eyes filled with tears stared back at Sasuke, golden hair sticking on his forehead and on the black pillow behind the blonde's head. Sasuke slowly traced the subtle marks on both of his best friend's once smooth cheeks. The scars appeared 2 years prior when Naruto was gone longer than a month and returned with them, acquired from his 2-week detention in enemy camp. He slept with the blonde for a good 3 months after that. No intimate touches were shared, only comfort any good friend or lover would do for a traumatized partner. Nights of terrible dreams, wailing of unknown injuries, petrified whimpers, and an anxious body that begged for an anchor to reality. And he held Naruto every night until those cries became whimpers and completely vanished with time. He could not understand how the blonde bore all of it. After all, he was still a child, and no matter what training he had been through, he was still young and should live his life a little more carefree than he should. "What's wrong, Naruto?" Sasuke asked softly after placing a soft kiss on his lover's lips, as if asking for apology. "Did I hurt you?" Naruto's head slowly shook and he gently pulled himself up, giving Sasuke a soft, lingering hug. "I'm sorry, Sasuke," he mumbles on his lover's ear. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," he only murmured, even though his voice appeared strained. Then quickly he disentangled himself from Sasuke's hold, wiped Sasuke and himself off of the evidence of their passion, and donned his sleeping attire once again. After fetching his pistol from the couch, he walked back toward the door on Sasuke's left side of the room. "Naruto, wait!" Sasuke called out, still unmoving from his position. The blonde halted and glanced back, waiting for his ex-lover. Now master's order. Tell me what you're sorry for. Turning around, Naruto bit his lower lip then took a few steps toward the prince. With a deep sigh, he stooped down and gave the love of his life a tender but firm kiss on the lips. I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore, he answered quietly after pulling back. But before he could step out of Sasuke's reach, the prince grasped his arm and heaved him back to him. What are you saying? The prince demanded. Freeing himself, Naruto lowered his head. This is the last time, Sasuke. Spare me with the remaining dignity I have for myself. I love you, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, but getting intimate with someone who doesn't share my feelings is stripping me off slowly of my self-respect. You love her ladyship Sakura, yet you're being unfair to her. This has to stop, you know it. Eventually it should, and that time is now. Sasuke frowned but he understood, nevertheless. His heart belonged to Sakura, but his body only called for Naruto. He was being selfish and a bastard, but still he couldn't imagine if any of the two would abandon him forever. Nothing will change, only this, Naruto murmured as he took a step back to the darkness, making his way back to his room. My life still belongs to you, my heart and my soul. Just be kind and spare my body, your majesty, it's the only thing I ask. Something within Sasuke shattered, his mouth flooded with a bitter taste and his heart unexpectedly twinged in pain. But Naruto, whatever they had done together, was his best friend first, and he would do anything in his power to grant whatever his heart desired. Very well. A sad, small smile appeared on Naruto's mouth, but when he uttered the words, "Thank you, your majesty," tears started to flow down his cheeks all the way to the curve of his jaw. Sasuke was unaware of it, however, ignorant that he had just sealed his confidante's future. Naruto vowed to be a full-fledged assassin the day his age of reasoning arrived. Remember that an A9 has spared your life and now it belongs to no one but me, Naruto murmured darkly, his eyes flashing red and his demeanor fearsome as he withdrew his high-class balisong, butterfly knife, from the businessman's neck. Straightening himself, Naruto walked away from the trembling man, leaving him sprawled on the floor inside a grandiose office. Slowly, he cleaned the blood off his dagger with the hem of his red sweatshirt, facing the glass wall overlooking the city of York. There was no emotion on his face as he folded the knife and gracefully hid it inside his black boots. Glancing behind him, eyes the color of midnight blue surveyed at least a dozen dead men on the floor. Blood pooled around them, their throats slit open. Now, who's the man behind this arrangement? He asked coldly. The middle-aged businessman named Alberto stared back at the frightening image in front of him, an angel of retribution, a fallen one. Midnight blue eyes that recently bled red slowly cleared, changing into crystalline blue gaze, giving him a vacant stare and patiently waiting for him to answer. One of your nobles, boss, the balding man stuttered, the last word spoken leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He never called anyone boss before. He was always on top, the one who gave orders, the one being feared. But there he was, on his knees, quivering in fright like a child terrified from a non-existent monster under his bed. Shapely flaxen eyebrows rose, pink lips grim in a frown. One of the nobles? Clarify. Alberto's eyes were trained on the floor, face in a grimace as he wondered what would happen to him if he disclosed the plan. But a quick glance at the towering youth in front of him swiftly changed his mind, and he quickly made a decision. After all, he wouldn't have lasted in the business world if he was clueless about A9, a very mysterious group, almost non-existent. The said faction was of cold-blooded killers and they almost never left anyone alive in missions. If they did, the person whose life had been spared will only continue to live as long as the assassin allowed it. The handful that had been secured of their survival was considered blessed and cursed at the same time. Sanctified in that as long as they were alive, no one could touch them for they were owned, and only their owner could take their lives away from them. Cursed in that their lives were no longer theirs, considered dead and would only continuously live to please their master. Lady Karen of Kusagakure wishes the disappearance of her grace, boss. Blue eyes widened a bit with the information. Naruto knew that Karen and Sakura were the last two candidates when the queen was still selecting a potential bride for the crown prince. Lady Karen, sole heiress of the Kusagakure region, gracefully accepted defeat when Sasuke himself picked out Sakura, But even then she was still hopelessly infatuated with him. Karen also had this special adoration for him, Naruto, to the point that once upon a time, she boldly requested him to be her own guard and let Sasuke find another. He needed to visit Karen soon, Naruto thought. Sasuke would undoubtedly be devastated should Sakura be killed, and with the consequences would end up in chaos and war. Clucking his tongue and temporarily closing his eyes, he knew that if he handed the young noble woman, Karen would be charged with treason and would swiftly be granted death without hope of trial, and he wouldn't allow it if he could do something. He was her friend, and as much as what the lady planned was downright sinister, he could not let it happen. Opening his eyes, Naruto gave the room a swift look, then checked if his favorite metal storm pistol was still on his back. Opening his silva lighter, he drew back his balisong, releasing the blade from its bite handle and smoldering the engraved, swirling Uzumaki symbol on the tip of the blade. When it turned red, the A9 stooped slightly in front of Alberto, seized the latter's head and tilted it aside to expose the man's neck. Hot metal met skin, a muffled scream of pain following, until the emblem scarred the man's neck. He sauntered toward the door, grabbing the trenchcoat lying on the ground. By the door, his troubled eyes spotted an image of Alberto's family in a photo frame lying on the side table. A plain-faced woman and 2 kids not older than 7 were smiling happily with their father. Biting the inside of his cheek, Naruto called out to his new subordinate. "I want you to bring your wife and kids for a very long vacation outside the country." "But boss, my bussin'. It's not a request, Alberto, it's an order. Your company won't suffer for that span of time, correct?" "Why yes boss. You'll hear from me when I need something, for now live as though you're a free man." Naruto threw back before disappearing completely in the dark hallway of the 45th floor of the world-renowned pharmaceutical corporation. 2. Cold early autumn wind touched Naruto's face as he stepped out of the building. The digital street clock announced that it was 40 minutes before 12, and the streets were bare save for thick mists blurring his vision. Gloomy orange street lamps gave more of a shadowy alarm than comfort to passers-by, and the trees shedding their leaves loomed eerily on the sidewalk. How many minutes had he been walking? 5, 10? Naruto had no idea. He gently leaned on one of the light posts, his breath haggard, and his face pale from blood loss. Touching his lower left abdomen, the young man had never been more glad of wearing the concealing colors of black pants and red sweatshirt. It was only a scratch, but it was still a bullet graze. It was his mistake, and the blonde felt mortified thinking that he was losing his nimbleness when he had been regarded as the most agile A9 ever. Catching his breath, Naruto started to walk once again in the foggy alley, his stride long and fast, until a passing empty cab came to his view. He quickly called it and prompted it to drive him back to the State University grounds. 2. The 15-floor exclusive dormitory appeared more of a 5-star hotel than just a temporary shelter for college students. Security was rigid and entrance required palm scanning. Upon entry at the reception area with its modern architectural design, a pretty receptionist required the residents to surrender his or her black identification card for safety purposes before one could access the elevators to reach their respective quarters. With a pleasant smile, Naruto waved his hand at the current receptionist after presenting his access badge, making his way to the hall where the elevators were waiting. When the elevator doors opened at his designated floor, Naruto was greeted with a bean-shaped swimming pool and makeshift garden. The night breeze shyly blew its cool breath, creating a silent giggle from the fluttering leaves and landing its icy lips on his already cold cheeks. Clutching his lower abdomen, he dragged himself toward his door and sloppily inserted the key with shaking hands. Inside, the heater was left on, warming his shivering, almost frozen body instantly. The modern and elegant interiors were silhouetted by the night lights outside the glass wall, slightly concealed by heavy dark blue drapes that were slightly pulled aside to frame the misty surroundings outside the building and the university's large structures that were just a few minutes' ride away. His trained ears easily picked up the sound amidst the humming appliances of the flat. Moans of pleasure, a soft throaty sound coming from a female. He decided to leave it at that, already knowing what was happening, but his body betrayed him as his feet took stealthy steps towards one of the bedroom doors. It was ajar, and from the pale light coming outside of the window he could see the prince's back muscles ripple as he pushed in and out. His lower half was modestly covered with a blanket, but Naruto knew what was happening behind it. Putting more pressure on his wounded abdomen, Naruto leaned back on the wall beside the door, a bitter smile flitting on his face. He had given that up, and he shouldn't be heartbroken when he knew Sakura had all the right to feel that wonderful body touching hers. But still, seeing it and knowing it was a big difference. His already broken heart bled more with the idea that while he was risking his life to save the bastard's heart, here they were consuming each other with desire. But then again, wasn't that what it was supposed to be? While the soldiers risked their lives to protect the kingdom, the royals eat, drink, and make merry until satisfied. They were nothing but tools, their lives expendable. Pulling himself from his stupor, Naruto left as quietly as he came in. He took his car keys and limply made his way down to his waiting yellow sports car. "Out again, sir?" the pretty receptionist asked him when he collected his card. With a wide smile he answered her with a wink. "Yeah, well, I don't want to intrude when our lovely royal couple is doing something youthful," he added, temporarily borrowing one of his friend's favorite word. The girl flushed a little, though she nodded with agreement. She hesitated for a moment before going on. "I hope I don't sound insolent, sir, but you don't look good. Are you okay? You're too pale." Naruto detested people who didn't mind their own business, but the young receptionist, whose tag stated her name as Belle, appeared sincere. Forcing a more cheerful look, Naruto gave Belle one of his dashing smiles that never failed to ease him out of any uncomfortable situation. "Never been better. Just a bit tired from all those extra school activities." Belle inspected him a little further, before nodding and giving his card back at him. "Be careful then, Mr. Namikaze." "Oh, I will. I'll just meet some of my friends to clear my head. Thank you for your concern though, I appreciate it big time." The moment he reached his car, Naruto grabbed his spare clothes hidden underneath the passenger seat and quickly changed out of his blood-soaked garment. Without even applying a disinfectant, he snatched the first aid kit in the compartment and wrapped his abdomen with a bandage. It will stop the flow of blood in the meantime, and would give him enough time to cool down until he went back to their shared suite and the couple was done pleasuring each other. 2. It was one of the most popular bars in the area, Kirsch, and the strictest as well. There were half a dozen bouncers roaming the area, not including those by the doors, and security guards with guns were always around. Famous young celebrities were always present and the liquors were the best. Pulling the collar of his black jacket up, covering his neck and chin from the icy wind, Naruto made his way to the entrance after parking his car a block from the area. Banned from entering seeing he was still underage, Naruto cursed under his breath and glared defiantly at the two bulky bouncers who had manhandled him. Not wanting to attract attention, he stepped back, flipped his phone open, and called someone who would always be available to him, any time of the day. With an ice-cold timbre in his voice, Naruto spoke in fluent Svenska, his blue eyes narrowing when the other person on the phone stuttered idiotically. Ludwig, a well-known underground trader, had one of his few underlings who happened to own Kirsch. The young Swedish man had tentacles scattered that having him made hard to get information easily available to Naruto. 30 seconds, Ludwig, Naruto said firmly, snapping his phone shut without waiting for an answer. He closed his eyes then, just like a kid, swung on the balls of his feet as he waited impatiently to be called in. He counted inside his head and when he reached 15, someone was already standing behind him. He could feel, or rather smell, the other person's fear and turmoil of not knowing what to do. Turning around, scrutinizing the middle-aged lady under his thick eyelashes, Naruto adjusted his pissed-off look into a more natural one. Mr. Namikaze? I'm Arisha, the bar's manager, and it's an honor to meet you. Sir, the woman stammered. I apologize for any misunderstanding, but B-Boss called and told me to look after you while within our premises. Please follow me inside. I should commend Ludwig for his haste response, then, he answered cheekily, his face looking younger than he already was. Arisha, of Middle Eastern and Western blood, had a relaxed beauty, tall and slender with an olive complexion and a generous mouth. Behind the thick makeup, the woman appeared to be plain and normal, but Naruto always looked beyond physical appearances as he assessed people by the skin beneath the skin. When he crossed the threshold, he playfully patted the bouncers on their arms and gave them a smirk. See ya around, boys. The muscled men, after a quick glare from Arisha, ignored the taunt and went back to their surveillance. Mr. Namikaze, the older woman called out as they navigated through the sea of people dancing on the wide and flickering dance floor. The sounds were deafening and everyone seemed intent to grind against each other with the music. Call me Naruto. Yes, Sir Naruto then. I assume you intend to relax downstairs, or not? Less noise would be nice. Very well, sir. He was led to the double doors at the back, down to a wide stairway to the lower ground. Security loitered around the hallways that led to another room. Upon entering, the private and quieter alehouse came into view. Circular couches hidden in the shadows reek of marijuana and alcohol. People who swayed on the dance floor, accompanied by slower music, appeared to enjoy making out in front of an audience, lost in their own world. Meetings were being held quietly in the darker corners. Men wearing business suits with scantily clad women half sprawled beside them were talking in low but harsh voices. Are you going to wait for someone, Sir Naruto? Ah, no. Naruto settled himself on one vacant stool while the manager instructed the bartender to give him anything he need, and when she said, anything, it means anything that the word implies. If you need anything, sir, anything at all, don't hesitate to ask Marina, she will have assistance to you, Arisha said, nodding to the attractive blonde bartender. Thanks, he answered, though it sounded more of a dismissal. The manager left, leaving him to his own thoughts with a smiling bar attendant in front of him. Hi, Marina greeted while wiping the area in front of him. You're too young and too cute to be here, though with Ms. Arisha herself as your invitee, you're safe, yeah? I guess, Naruto answered tiredly. He was sociable by nature and loved to talk to anyone, but he was in pain and he had no energy to spend flirting. Give me a Black Russian on a rock. That's a bit hard, kid, why not try some beer? Naruto frowned and glared. A Black Russian on a rock. 1 shot Kalyuha, 2 shots vodka, and 2 shots coke. Can you at least do that? Marina gave him a long stare before shrugging her shoulders. She might not know specific things about her customers, but she discerned the fact that most, if not all of the patrons given a privilege to be there were either dangerous or properly connected ones. Yeah, sure, kid. No need to mar your pretty face with a frown, yeah? The blonde bit his lower lip in exasperation. He was not sure if he should laugh with the older woman's insinuation or get frustrated with too much talking. In the end, he sighed. I'm sorry for snapping at you like that, had a bad day. I just wanted to be left alone and have a bit of peace. I hope you know what I mean. The bartender smiled. I'll give you that, then, just after I fix your drink, kid. Thank you, Marina. The blonde woman winked at him. Anything for someone as cute as you. Too bad cradle snatching is not for me. A small smile curved on Naruto's pink lips. He then bent his elbow and nonchalantly covered his mouth with his right hand, hiding the blooming smile that settled on his face. He was not stupid not to know that he was attractive, but since he was around Sasuke most of the time, the prince's sinfully handsome appearance always overshadowed his boyish looks. Flattery from someone as attractive as Marina was always welcomed. Half an hour later, glass still half full, eyes closed. 2 slender arms enfolded him from behind and a familiar scent filled his nose. Hello, baby, a soft throaty voice whispered close to his ear. Tamari, he grunted and opened his eyes. Looking sideways, his vision was then filled by the lovely face of a woman in her early 20s, bleach blonde hair pulled into 2 ponytails on top of her head. Slowly, a pair of soft hands moved down his lean body until they reached his wound. Though his face was devoid of emotions, his eyes never lied to those he considered family. Tamari slowly pulled away from him, settling closely beside him. Her movement made her short leather skirt hike slightly up and the low neckline showed off her ample chest more than necessary. Why? The young woman asked softly. Why questions always signified many things. Like why did he get hurt? How did he get hurt? What happened? How could he get hurt? And at the end of those questions, a conclusion of, there was no way you get hurt. It's a bullet, Tamari, and though I could perfectly dodge a firing arrow, I'm not some Superman to evade a gunshot. Have you? No, I got no time to clean it and disinfect it properly. Tamari frowned. Are you stupid, Naruto? Wait, I know you're stupid, but that's beyond stupidity. And what do you mean you don't have time? You were gone for a week and with that wound you should be resting. It's just a graze, I had worse. Right, I forgot you almost died twice, been tortured countless of times, so a blood loss should not be a big deal at all, Tamari mocked. You could have gotten away from it, you know. But you're paler than paper. And you stink of blood. No one knows, he muttered as he carefully sipped his drink. I know, and any blood-starved killer here would know. Anyone who's been playing with death would always know. I'm sorry, he said, eyeing the girl with his best innocent look. You're sorry for what? She huffed. Leaning slightly on the bar with annoyance on her pretty features, dark green eyes narrowed in displeasure. Gaara's going to kill me if he found out you got wounded because of me. You know my reason and Gaara doesn't need to find out. I'm pretty sure he'll find out about this somehow. You know Gaara, he has ways I could only dream of having. Don't worry, I'll make sure Neji would demand for his presence more just so he would stop spying on what's happening to us all. He's worse than a parent. He can't help it, Naruto. Plus, besides being Sir Neji's personal bodyguard, he was tasked to supervise us all. I hope you haven't forgotten about it. Tisk, I know, Naruto replied in a hushed tone, and then added with a sly smirk as he remembered something. Has he met her? Temari shook her head. No. Not even I nor Kankuro had seen her. And this girl, she's of noble birth, isn't she? Why would they betroth her to him? And I don't mean that Gaara is beneath her, but you know, those stupid bloodlines and titles and… Temari frowned and snapped back. Well, Gaara might be an A9, but he's still an heir to my country's throne. He's as much as a true-blooded royalty to whoever he's been intended to. As soon as things clear up, I'm going to make sure my brother's going to sit where he should rightfully be seated. Almost forgot, Naruto quickly answered, honestly forgetting that his friend was indeed a crown prince. He had been with the Sabaku siblings for so long, that sometimes he forgot that they were of noble blood as well. And you have my support if you needed it. I consider Gaara as my brother already, and you and the rest as my family. Pinching her nose, Temari looked dejectedly at him. She was aware that Naruto was trying to drag the topic off him, but Temari would not allow it. Sakura is under my care, Naruto. I should have never agreed with you. I'm more than capable of doing that mission, if that's what you're implying, Naruto snapped, his features hardening, knowing that they were back to the previous topic. Idiot, I'm not saying that and you know what I mean. But you know how important you are to the group. Shut it, Naruto growled, closing his eyes once again and touching his throbbing side. I did it for Sasuke. The threat is directly related to our crown prince. If her ladyship dies, his majesty would be devastated and would cause chaos within the circle of royalty. False accusations could take place and war would ensue. I already explained that when I asked you to transfer your mission to me. Temari understood that. You should at least be resting now. Sasuke and Sakura is at the pad. I want to give them some privacy. I'm not a masochist after all. Really now? The older blonde teased. They had enough privacy for a week, Naruto. His Majesty has insatiable energy. Sakura looks worn out every day. Naruto snorted and finished off his drink. Before, one round with Sasuke's enough to last him for a week. The blonde woman eyed him silently. She knew about Naruto's feelings and the UAL affair he had with the raven-haired prince before Naruto himself ended it. She was Sakura's personal minder, after all, and being the only closest A9 to Naruto, she was the only one he could talk to. He's not some incubus, don't refer to his majesty like that. I'm stating a fact. Alright already. Why are you here, by the way? Shouldn't you be around Sakura and Sasuke? Naruto asked, his eyes with a tinge of dread in them. Relax. I asked Kiba to keep an eye on the two. Not literally, mind you. Dog breath's here? Yeah, he requested a place for a week or two at most. And since Sakura is almost always staying with Sasuke since you left, the flat is free. And you're here because? Shika's in one of the rooms upstairs, Temari answered lazily. A smile bloomed on Naruto's mouth and sincere delight became evident in his eyes. I understand. You should make the most of your time together while he's here. And since I'm back, I'll cover for you. You've done too much for me already, brat. I think I can manage, Temari teased, though she was very grateful. Shikamaru's leaving the following day anyway, so there's no need to fuss about it. Naruto stuck his tongue out before muttering, I'm not a brat. Yeah, and what you did was very mature, the female assassin answered with a grin. Come on, I'll see what I can do with your wound, then I'll treat you to some ramen afterwards. Well, that's the best thing I heard the whole day. Let's go. Temari laughed softly as they walked out of the smoky room together, and proceeded to one of the Kirsch's bedroom above them. Now, then and forever too. Sasuke looked up at his bedroom ceiling, soft warm breath blowing at his neck where his fiancée's head was resting, an arm possessively embracing his naked chest. It was hard, tiring, and long, but it took at least 3 orgasms from Sakura before he could have his own release. But even after that, he could not feel the bliss he usually felt whenever he was with his blonde friend. It had been 3 months since Naruto ended the favor, and those 3 months had been hell, you ally speaking. But whenever Sakura initiated it, he could not say no. Some would probably assume that his UAL appetite was unquenchable, but in reality his fiancée's lust was beyond his comprehension. It was as though every time she saw him, her hormones worked double time. And he could not just push her away, who would? Especially if the person offering it to you was the one you love. With a deep exhale, Sasuke gently pushed Sakura away from him, then took a quick cold shower. It was 1 in the morning, very early yet too late at the same time. It had been a week since Naruto left for God knows where, and he must admit he was missing his friend. Since they stopped the deed, he always craved his best friend's presence. Always wanted him around, even without touching, just having Naruto's presence calmed him in a way he didn't understand. Maybe because the other boy had been a constant in his life, someone he'd been used to and viewed as a companion until the indefinite future. Because of that, an unknown fear had crept to him slowly. He also found his own dependence unacceptable as the royal crown prince. But it never stopped him from dreading the time Naruto would leave him. Though he would never voice it, it made him feel weak, and it was this weakness that infuriated him to no end. Sasuke, clad in silky black pajamas, settled himself in front of his study table and scanned his notes for a quick review. He was currently taking 2 majors, political analysis and economics, curricula best suited for the future king of his country. The royal family advisors also enrolled his bodyguard in the same classes for the sole purpose of watching over him, but he opposed it and let his best friend choose his own courses. Naruto, though, argued with him, saying he was alright as it was and that he didn't really need a college diploma because he would never need it in his current line of work. He also argued that he was already a fluent speaker and reader of different languages and had done his various advanced educational trainings since he was 6, and that his main priority was to make sure Sasuke was safe all the time. But Sasuke made it an order in the end, which Naruto could not refuse. They both ended up taking double majors, one in economics where the blonde could keep an eye on him, and his second, chemistry. Naruto told him chemistry would hone his knowledge in making bombs, one work he always enjoyed. The barely audible sound of the flat door opening woke him from his reverie. Alarmed, Sasuke moved silently to his feet and snuck his way outside his bedroom, keeping his form hidden in the shadows of the room. But when a familiar blonde hair appeared through the small opening, Sasuke relaxed. After Naruto pressed the door close, he instantly recognized the feeling of being watched. Turning around, sky-blue eyes fastened to a pair of black onyx ones, form concealed in the shadow's embrace. His heart leapt on his chest when a smile ghosted in the other's red lips. Now, then and forever too. Sasuke had given up years ago of trying to hide from Naruto. Knowing the blonde's background, it was impossible for him to attempt blending in the dark. Naruto's eyes were always sharp, and his instincts never failed him. Sasuke, Naruto greeted as he walked casually to the standing prince, whose pale arms were folded on his chest. "You've gone too long, dumbass. It's only a week, bastard, I've been out for months before, no need to fret over your safety." "Sides, Temari's been around, hasn't she?" the blonde fired back, grabbing the refrigerator door open and quickly snatching a bottle of mineral water to take big gulps of the liquid. "I'm not a baby, moron. I don't need to be watched constantly. I know how to fire a gun and could do more than simple breaking of the neck if someone even tries to hurt me," Sasuke answered, voice hushed yet still held a tinge of arrogance. He sat on one of the kitchen chairs while watching his friend. Naruto clucked his tongue as he leaned on the refrigerator. "Just to remind you, Your Majesty, I'm here to make sure no life would be taken by your royal hands. So don't talk stupid shit like that, you're making me sound incapable." "Sasuke, Naruto. It's Sasuke. And don't ridicule me, dumbass." "Okay fine, Sasuke, bastard, or whatever you wanted to be called," Naruto tutted, moving out from his position and walking back to the living room, Sasuke trailing behind him. "What do you think you're doing, stupid?" the prince asked in his usual monotone when Naruto started disrobing. swiftly leaving a trail of discarded clothes in his wake. "I'm going to take a quick bath, something I deserve for a long tiring work saving her ladyship's ass," Naruto answered, unconsciously forgetting his manners. He constantly overlooked it after an hour or two talking openly without restriction with others from the group. When he reached the spacious bathroom, he was naked as the day he was born. His bandage had been stripped of as well. "And I'm cleaning it after I'm done, so no need to bitch about it," he added. He was done shampooing his hair and lathering his body with soap, and was currently letting the spray of warm water fall on him. Both of his hands were propped on the tiled wall, his head down and eyes closed. The warm touches of water relaxed him and temporarily numbed his throbbing wound. "Naruto, I dare you again to voice contempt of Sakura. I don't mind if you call me names, but I forbid you to use any foul language when referring to my fiancée. Is that clear?" Sasuke snarled, pushing the bathroom door open in anger, the blonde's clothes gathered in his arms. "And what do you mean saving her?" Yes, I hear you loud and clear, Your Majesty," Naruto answered in a weary voice. Sasuke would have ranted some more at the way Naruto spoke to him, but no words left his mouth. His eyes stayed glued at the sight in front of him. Behind the clear glass shower door, the blonde teen was unmoving. His tan skin, devoid of any scar due to his fast healing ability, was slowly being caressed by the water, his golden hair dripping and plastered to his flushed skin, lean and toned muscles glistening against the bright light of the shower room. Something hard and hot stirred in his lower half, and he felt every fiber in his body swell with heat and lust. His clenched hands trembled under the clothes. His hands had been familiar with that skin for a long time, soft smooth skin over strong firm muscles. But the stirring desire completely evaporated when his eyes noticed the red liquid slowly falling against shapely fine legs and pooling around Naruto's feet. "The hell, Naruto, you're injured," Sasuke exclaimed, though his voice remained cold. Hazy blue eyes peeked at him under wet golden hair. "Congratulations, Mr. Obvious," Naruto answered sarcastically. He slowly stepped out of the shower, uncaring of his nakedness, and quickly wrapped the towel around his waist. Blood seeped on the white material, the wound now completely open and bleeding harder. "You moron, are you trying to bleed yourself to death?" the prince growled as he approached Naruto. "I'm perfectly fine, you know what I am, for Pete's sake," Naruto replied imperturbably. "Getting wounded and killed is part of my job, I hope you haven't forgotten that." With those words, something cold and hard struck Sasuke. It was fear of something. What that something was, Sasuke was not sure at the moment. "Naruto, I know. Naruto sighed as he dried his hair with another towel. "Geez, so hard to please you, Sasuke. Someone's threatening the house of Harunos, specifically Sakura, so since she's directly related to you, I made sure no harm would befall her ladyship." Sasuke frowned at the blonde's explanation. "It's not your problem, moron, and let Temari handle anything regarding Sakura." "Did you just hear what I said, bastard?" Naruto asked. His energy to fight was gone, but the prince can be really persistent if he wanted to. "Sakura's life is directly related to you. If something is to happen to her, you'll be a wreck. I'm only protecting you and the throne. And Lady Sakura's life is worth more than this wound, or my life for that matter, so quit it. If Sakura dies, you'll be distraught. I'm only protecting your heart because I love you. And she's much more important than me, no need for you to fret over me." That was what Sasuke actually understand. He knew Naruto very well and he could now decipher his best friend's hidden words. Sometimes what he said was not really what he wanted to imply. "Oh Naruto, you're bleeding," a distressed exclaim came from the door. Both boys shifted their gazes to the barely robed lady, a delicate hand covering her mouth. "I'm sorry if I frightened you, Your Highness," Naruto murmured, moving around to hide his injury from the future queen. "No, Naruto, it's not that," Sakura quickly replied, worry-lacing her tone. "You should have it patched up soon." "I'm fine milady, please don't get too worried over this." "It's okay, Sakura, I'll fix him up later," Naruto heard from Sasuke, his voice somehow soothing. When he turned around, Sasuke was gently stroking Sakura's long bleached auburn hair that had now appeared almost pink. Her short satin night robe clung closer to her shapely body as the prince enfolded her in his arms. Averting his gaze and swallowing the thick lump in his throat, Naruto silently left the royal couple as they exchanged sweet whispers of comfort to each other. Now, then, and forever too. In his blue boxers, Naruto covered his wound with thick cotton towel to stop it from flowing down his underwear. Tamari had cleaned it and disinfected it hours earlier, but now the wound had become raw again from the quick shower he took. Times like this, Naruto regretted the fact that he never took the medicinal course seriously during his training. He always thought it was a waste of time, but now he wondered if he could go back and retake it. Naruto looked up when the connecting door between his room and the prince's room opened, revealing a stone-faced Sasuke carrying a rather large medicine kit. "Let me see it, moron," Sasuke said upon reaching him. Naruto was sitting on the edge of the bed, leaving Sasuke to kneel on the carpeted floor and inspect his wound. A small smile tugged on his lips as he watched the future king of the strongest nation in the world kneeling on his side and meticulously fussing over his wound. "Sasuke, HN? You do know I'm very honored at the moment, right?" he teased. Dark eyes glared at him before carrying on his work. "What are you saying, stupid? A future king is kneeling freely to his disposable bodyguard. I feel so special." A finger poked hard on Naruto's side, making him hiss in pain. "Ouch. The fuck, bastard. Language, dumbass," Sasuke warned. "And you're not disposable. Not for me." Naruto became silent at the reply. The late-night stillness tinkled in his ear and his heart beat a little faster than usual. Something warm touched him inside, to the very core of his heart. But he had stopped hoping long ago, though he always cherished those rare moments when Sasuke showed him concern that was beyond two people forced to grow up together. Naruto quietly hummed in response just to lessen the deafening silence. He cast his gaze outside the window where rain started to drizzle over the city. It was going to be a very cold night, and there was nothing he wished more than to curl on his bed with a warm body he could cuddle. A bitter smile formed on his lips. When would he stop dreaming? "I'm doing this not as a prince, Naruto, but as your friend. So never think that a king would kneel in front of someone like you," Sasuke calmly added. Naruto blinked. He had no idea if he should be offended or flattered. But when he pondered over it, something prickled in his eyes and his chest clenched painfully. Sasuke was right. Who was he anyway? He was no one but a part of a powerful weapon of his country. Even his lone family, his brother, had cast him aside. When the bandage had finally been wrapped properly, Sasuke returned the unused medical supplies into the kit and straightened up. A gloomy atmosphere was now lingering over the assassin's form, which he easily noticed. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Naruto whispered, head bent over, hair covering his face. "It's Sasuke, moron. Sasuke." "Ah yes, Sasuke. Thank you, Sasuke," the blonde corrected half-heartedly. Turning away, Naruto slowly donned his sleeping attire, a pair of orange pajamas and his favorite nightcap. When he turned back, Sasuke was staring at him intently. Something within those bottomless black eyes spoke of things Naruto could not recognize. Sasuke's usually indifferent expression softened, a small smile on his lips. "Naruto." Naruto hurriedly cut him off. "Good night, Your Maj. Sasuke. Her Highness is probably waiting for you. I apologize for my impudence, but I'm really exhausted." Naruto was afraid that whatever Sasuke might tell him, it might break his heart forever. He was tired of hearing that he was important to the prince because he was his best friend. He heard it a few times, and Sasuke always thought it lessened his grief. Those words were simply continuous reminders that Sasuke would never return his feelings. The prince slightly frowned, but nodded in understanding. "I understand. Good night then, Naruto." 5 days later, a certain flaxen-haired teenager hurriedly stepped inside the elevator of the dormitory. It was late afternoon, the last weekday of the week. Friday was always his busiest day, where most of his class schedule had been cramped up to fill the missing subjects of his 2 majors. It was also the day where the raven-haired royalty had his school off, thus Tamari had to keep an eye on the royal couple. Naruto was in a hurry to pack up. He needed to fly back to their country and drop a surprise visit to Karen. He had already been postponing the imperative conversation for 5 days, and he felt incompetent for taking time that might have given a chance for another plan to be executed. That was why he was on a hurry to notify Sasuke about his departure the following day. Swiping his access badge, Naruto pushed open the door that led to the rooftop, where the prince's spacious pad was located. He found Sasuke executing a Tai Chi move with his eyes closed. His upper body was bare and glistening with sweat, even against the cold autumn weather. The prince's nightmare had started to haunt him in his sleep again, more compelling than before the night Naruto arrived. Thus, Sakura had constantly stayed with the Sasuke to soothe him once he woke. But even with a bed companion, the prince always had a hard time going back to sleep once woken from his short slumber. The tranquility brought by the exercise somewhat helped him relieve stress and clear his mind for the whole day. But then again, the many sleepless nights had taken a toll on the prince's already slate-hard attitude. He had become more easily angered, and would snap at his servants for any slight mistake that they never once did. Luckily for the maids and other servants, their duty stopped after dinner, and they could be free from the prince's livid state for the rest of the night. Unfortunately for Naruto, he had to deal with Sasuke all the time, much more now that the raven-haired royalty seemed to demand for his presence wherever he went. Adjusting the strap of his bag on his shoulder and pushing off the hood of his red jacket, Sapphire Eyes took notice of Sakura and Temari talking over a cup of hot coffee behind the glass wall of the suite. There was a royal butler a distance away from them, head bowed and waiting patiently for any assistance the two needed. Heaving a cold breath, Naruto casually walked over to his young lord, intending to inform the young monarch about his plan. But the moment he reached the other man, the blonde assassin forgot his intentions when he saw how serene Sasuke looked. It had been a while since he last saw him that calm. Most of the time, even behind the prince's indifferent looks and composed actions, Naruto knew that there were loads of things bothering the crown prince. It had been a long time since Naruto read what every minuscule change on Sasuke's appearance meant. With the patience of a hunter, the young assassin quietly leaned on the building's railing and watched Sasuke finish his routine. Stone-cold onyx eyes opened to meet a pair of smiling blue ones. Naruto grinned and quickly made his way towards the royal teen. Sasuke took the clean towel beside him and wiped the sweat off his body, all the while staring at the approaching boy. After Naruto's return and the constant bad dream that accompanied it, Sasuke had no idea as to why he always craved his minder's presence. It was odd, though truth be told Naruto wasn't a dull company. Nevertheless, he had never been particularly needy of the blonde's company before, as if the pit of worry in his stomach would convulse whenever Naruto was not around. It was like a forewarning, telling him to keep his best friend around or else he would lose him forever. With a frown, Sasuke faintly shook his head to get rid of the thoughts. He grabbed his water bottle and downed its contents, then tossed the towel over his shoulder. Sasuke, Naruto greeted enthusiastically once he reached the young royalty. Sasuke raised his brow as a way of prompting Naruto to continue. I have to leave tomorrow morning. There are some matters I need to discuss with Lady Karen, and I need to talk with her personally. Sasuke scowled and replied without even digesting what Naruto was saying, no. Pardon? The blonde looked confused. What do you mean no? What is it in the word, no, don't you understand, moron? The N or the O? The prince spat out, sarcasm leaking out in every word. You can't just say no when I'm doing my duty. Sasuke cut him off with a growl. And tell me, what, dumbass, is your duty? Taken aback with the prince's response, Naruto scrunched his forehead as he tried to figure out where Sasuke's outrage was coming from. Did he do or say something that could upset the raven-haired prince, he wondered. It's my duty to make sure you're safe and well, Sasuke. No need to bite my head off, he answered calmly. Turning his back on Naruto, his voice still chilly, Sasuke asked, and is your constant leave due to preserving my life, or do you enjoy too much of my generosity that you just run off whenever you please, Naruto? What? The blonde countered back with his own growl, his instinct to contest with his best friend's bastardly attitude awakening. Are you saying I'm just dilly-dallying and neglecting my responsibility? You should know by now, your majesty, he bitterly spat the last word, that every fiber in my body exists only to please and protect you, and the least you can do is have confidence in me, you bastard. Sasuke turned around halfway, eyes spitting daggers as a surge of unexplainable anger stirred in his body. He had no idea as to why he was so furious, and why his usual perfect control simply vanished. Something just snapped in him when he heard about the blonde's plan of leaving just to pay some girl a visit. So leaving again, after arriving just a week ago, to visit Karen is now a part of keeping me safe? Yes, What the hell is your problem anyway? Out of all the people, Sasuke, you very well know how much I sacrificed to look after you. How could you possibly accuse me of negligence? It's your job to look after me, so don't assume that I owe you anything. Naruto held his breath back, biting on the inside of his cheek and averting his eyes away from the prince's fuming ones. It hurt so much to hear that from the person he cared about the most, but it pained him even more to know that what Sasuke told him was the bitter truth. It was just that he was doing said duty not for his country or for its future sovereign leader, but because he wanted, willingly, to protect Sasuke. This has something to do with you and Her Highness' safety, Naruto said softly, not explaining anything more than what was necessary. He wasn't going to place Karen into a predicament she could not escape. But looking back, the said patrician woman had already signed her death warrant when she ordered for Sakura's death. According to an intelligence report, Karen might have, they believe that, she can be of use for this operation. Sasuke remained glaring at the blonde, and then his eyes softened a little before it returned to its usual indifference. No, and that's final, he stated firmly, then proceeded inside, a pair of green eyes following him until he disappeared within the confines of his pad. Naruto gritted his teeth, hands clenched at both sides as he muttered curses inside his head. His shoulders sagged, head slightly bowed as he watched his young lord's retreating figure. 3. Sakura rose from her seat once her fiancé had gone back inside, curious as to what the two men were arguing about. Following the crown prince's trail, she found him ordering the servants to leave, even if it was still quite early for them to be dismissed. Leave, now, Sasuke instructed in a cool, controlled tone, though the twitch in his jaw showed that he was anything but. As you wish, your majesty, the butler, a tall balding man, answered with a bow. The rest of the servants who were gathered around him gave their own bow before leaving the prince without a word. Sasuke, what's wrong? Sakura asked, approaching the raven-haired teen from behind. She stopped right in front of him, her green eyes imploring. It's nothing, Sasuke answered dismissively, black eyes raking the serene figure of his fiancée. Sakura smiled, stood at the tip of her toes, and gave Sasuke a quick kiss on the lips. Her soft, delicate hands rested on the prince's toned chest. I hope you haven't forgotten what today is, even after that argument with him. The prince rested his hand on his betrothed's tiny waist, his usual cold demeanor warming a little. No, I haven't forgotten at all. Well then, enjoy your night, okay? You both deserve it, Sakura beamed, and try not to undermine Naruto too much. I know how conceited you can be at times whenever you're around him. Just because you're the crown prince and he's your bodyguard, and the fact that he usually lets you do as you please, doesn't mean you can hurt the poor boy. He's a friend before anything else, and might I remind you that he's your best friend. Sasuke grunted, pushing Sakura gently away from him. He knew that his fiancé only meant well, but he didn't need to be reminded of these things. Sometimes, even though he acted in consideration of Sakura's feelings and because of his love for her, he found her irritating, especially whenever she tried to include herself in his and his best friend's life. What he had with Naruto was private, something he and only Naruto shared, and he disliked the idea of having anyone else involved, which was the same sentiment he had with his relationship with Sakura. Well, we'll be going now, Sakura said. Sasuke merely nodded at her before he proceeded to the bathroom to take his shower and prepare for the night. 3. Naruto led the discharged workers to the door, swiping his access card to give them exit. He bade them farewell before walking back across the makeshift garden. He was greeted again by Sakura and Temari, both exiting the pad at a leisurely pace. When Sakura's eyes met his, the emerald orbs widened and her comely face became even lovelier. She elegantly approached him, and to his surprise she flung her arms around him. Her sweet fragrance assaulted his nose as Sakura buried her face in his neck, her arms clinging tightly to his shoulders. Why, your highness, he stuttered in surprise. Naruto, how many times do I have to tell you to call me Sakura? The woman stated, pulling back enough to look at him. Heat surfaced on his cheeks when Sakura leaned closer and gazed into his eyes. Sakura, what? Sakura's giggle filled his ears, and to his further astonishment, the future queen gave him a soft kiss on the cheek. Happy birthday, Naruto, she whispered softly into his ear. I haven't gotten you anything yet, but Temari's going to accompany me to buy something for you. I've been busy for the past few days and had no time to visit any shops, so forgive me, A look of understanding dawned on his face as he realized that yes, indeed, today was his 18th birthday. Never had he given any thought about the said occasion, but ever since he became Sasuke's personal bodyguard, the Crown Prince always made sure to celebrate it, even if it was just the two of them. But now he wondered if there would be any, considering the one-sided argument they had earlier. He could not grasp how he could forget it though. It had always been his most anticipated day every year, since he could have Sasuke's special treatment all to himself, even just for a fraction part of the day. Naruto glanced at the blonde woman behind Sakura who was already smiling at him, before looking back at the young patrician woman again. You don't have to give me anything, Sakura. It's more than enough that we're friends. Sakura cupped his cheek with both her hands, a pout marring her pretty face. Stop saying nonsense, Naruto. You're a special friend, and I intend to give only the best to those I care for. Thank you, Sakura. Sakura just stared at him for a while, before giving him his personal space back. Don't let your spat earlier dampen your day, okay? You know why Sasuke's mood has been awful lately, so don't take it against him. Naruto nodded, smiling back at the lovely noble. True, he was hurt with the way Sasuke accused him of irresponsibility, but he wasn't in any way mad at Sasuke. Their exchange earlier had something to do with their professional relationship, thus whatever resentment he had with the Crown Prince stayed with him. He was the future king's personal minder, and that was that. See you later, birthday boy, Sakura said, before leaving him behind to deal with the raven-haired prince. Now, then and forever 3. The young assassin hurled himself on the bed once he entered his room. He tossed his bag beside him, and spread himself like an eagle on the soft mattress. The bedroom was dark, but the 3 monitors on the table at the left side of the room gave off a bluish gleam. The quiet sound pulsating from the security screen that displayed the videos from the surveillance cameras scattered around the floor was soothing. Naruto almost fell asleep until the bedroom light was switched on, burning through his eyes. With a quiet growl, Naruto turned around to lie on his stomach. He folded his arms on top of his head and ignored Sasuke's quiet steps. Something landed on his back, prompting him to lift his head, his eyes spying a white towel. With a bit of reluctance, he glanced sideways at the monarch towering over him and met Sasuke's calm gaze. Summery blue eyes blinked as if asking for an explanation on what this was all about. Hurry up and take a shower already, we're going to be late, Sasuke said. A small towel was wrapped about his lower half, and another one was being used to dry his hair. Late for what? Naruto asked dumbly. He flipped around and sat up. Sasuke paused for a while and gave him a withering glare. For the interstate soccer finals, moron. Have you forgotten that already? The prince waved the 2 VIP tickets in his hand, showing it to Naruto. The blonde tilted his head slightly before unconsciously rubbing the back of his neck. I haven't forgotten the game, no. But I had no idea that we had plans to watch it together or something. No, we didn't. But I don't need to ask for your consent when I know you've been looking forward to see this the whole season. So will you hurry up already, or don't you want to go? It's not that, bastard, but… I'll just call Neji to see if he'll accompany me instead. Sasuke grunted, turning around to leave the room. Hey, come on, Sasuke, wait. Naruto exclaimed, jumping from his seat to grab the hand holding the ticket. The prince almost fell from the unexpected leap, and Naruto instinctively held the older teen's body close to him to keep their balance. Sasuke looked down at him with a smirk, his dark eyes dancing with amusement as he watched the blonde's smooth tan skin slowly turn into a bright warm pink. They were so close that Naruto could smell the fresh smell of pine coming from the other's newly washed skin. Sasuke's milky skin was warm under his hand, and the tiny sparks from where their skin met rattled his stomach. It was at times like these that Naruto felt as though he was just a normal teenager, where there was no need for him to kill anyone just to continue existing. I suggest you keep your distance from me, moron, until you're done taking a shower, Sasuke said, amusement lacing his voice. Naruto quickly released the prince and took a couple of steps back. His full pink lips fell in a frown and his eyes narrowed into slits. Are you saying I reek, you stupid asshole? Just so you know, I regularly take a bath even when it's snowing, and I certainly had one this morning. Quote, TCH. Don't you know that my nose is so sensitive that I can smell all the grime, sweat and dirt that accumulated on your clothing the whole day? Sasuke retorted lightheartedly, his perfect nose wrinkled in distaste just to prove his point. What? Naruto glowered at him. Sensitive nose my ass. You didn't mind getting down and dirty with me before. Onyx's eyes widened a little, before he leered as he answered suggestively, his eyes flashing with unhidden thirst. A desire he had been keeping on leash for months. That was different. In fact, I still wouldn't mind doing it. The blonde's expressive face contorted into an astonished expression, mouth gaping like a fish, and the already wide set of eyes growing even larger. That's not, no, it's, I did not try. I'm not implying. Naruto sputtered incoherently, and when he could no longer straighten his jumbled thoughts and emotions, he swiftly grabbed his towel and rushed from the bedroom and into the shower. 3. What was he thinking? Naruto thought as he gently lathered himself with his own fragrant soap. He knew it was only a slip of the tongue, but for months since their last intimate encounter, they had avoided raising any UAL implications. Yes, he wasn't a fucking virgin, and he didn't deny that he still fantasized about having Sasuke's naked body grinding into his. The prince's soft pale hands touching his skin, sinfully hot lips waking every pore of his body. Neither did he renounce the thoughts of being filled entirely with pleasure by the man he loved. True, he was the one who was denying it to himself, but it didn't mean he didn't crave it, especially when he was stressed, tired, and lonely. Yes, the act might not be out of love, but having the person you wanted the most touch and caress you like you were his entire world. Even for a minute, somewhat made his unrequited love a little more bearable, his cursed existence rather acceptable and his soul insignificantly untainted by the life he chose for him and his country. He declined the single opportunity that he can somewhat hold Sasuke, because he wasn't completely immoral as most of the people who knew A9 thought they were. Sakura was his friend, and though his heart and soul soared every time he and the prince became one, his mind detested the idea of doing it behind her back. And as 3 years progressed, his guilt ate at him, so much so that he could no longer stand talking to her without throwing up later. Sakura loved Sasuke and the prince loved her in the same way. He, on the other hand, was just a tool for his prince, a tool that should be tossed aside while it wasn't too late. But that touch earlier had awoken his almost slumbering desire. That soft skin against strong lean muscles, the fucking familiar smell that almost brought him in an unruly rage of lust, and that passionate stare that him weak in the knees. Bright blue eyes darkened as he stared down at his fully awakened member, standing tall, hard and red against his stomach. With a hiss, he gripped it firmly and started to move his calloused hand against it, gripping hard but moving slow as he visualized that, instead of his own tan ones, it was a pair of pale strong hands that were touching him. Sasuke was almost always tender with him, never rushing things, and he loved to extend foreplay whenever he could. If, by chance, he became too rough because of his lust, he would never go without a kiss on the lips, and he was always patient when preparing him. Naruto would sometimes delude himself into believing that the prince was not fucking him, but making love with him. Naruto panted as he increased the pace, eyes closed and his usual alertness flying out the window while he concentrated on giving himself pleasure. The blonde was so lost that even the opening and closing of the shower door was beyond his senses. At least, not until strong arms encircled his waist from behind and his back was pressed onto a naked and very familiar hard chest. Sapphire eyes snapped open and he would have quickly hit the intruder, if it weren't for Sasuke's familiar deep voice. Naruto? He glanced behind him only to be greeted by the prince's eyes looking down at him, filled with desire. Sasuke nuzzled the back of Naruto's neck, then he rested his chin on the blonde's shoulder. Sasuke? Stop it, Naruto hissed without much conviction in his voice as he tried desperately to push the prince's hands away from him. But the raven-haired youth turned a deaf ear to Naruto's protests as he continued to suck and kiss the blonde's skin, trailing down to that sweet spot at the junction of the blonde's shoulder and neck. One hand held Naruto firmly against him, while the other roamed, kneading the blonde's warm and wet skin. Naruto gritted his teeth, preventing the pleasurable moans to escape from his lips. Why? Wait, Naruto panted, please, Sasuke, no, we can't. Sakura? Sasuke turned him around, pressing him against the wall. And before he could utter any words of protest, a sudden press of familiar lips against his assaulted him. Naruto's voice was lost in a moan when a moist tongue delved into his lips and forced his own to dance along with it. Sasuke sucked and nibbled at his lower lips and tilted his head to deepen the kiss. The small voice inside him that had been urging him to put a stop to this was reduced to nothing but an inaudible drone when Sasuke's mouth moved from his lips and slid across the sensitive skin of Naruto's neck, then teeth latched onto a spot just below his ear. He could no longer think straight, not even considering anyone's feelings, even that of Sakura's, as waves of wonderful sensations raced throughout his body. Naruto wrapped his arms around Sasuke, hands trailing on the powerful back, from his neck and down to the small of Sasuke's back. The only single thought that ran through his mind was mine. Even for just a single moment, Sasuke was his. Sasuke pressed himself more against Naruto, his hips grinding against the blonde's, their erections brushing against each other. He ground his painfully hard erection against the smaller boy's and was rewarded with a beautiful sound escaping at last from Naruto's swollen lips. "Moan for me, Naruto. I want to hear how much you missed this. How badly you want me," Sasuke whispered huskily into Naruto's ear as he continued to grate his hips against him. The blonde, lost in lust, unconsciously complied with the prince's request. He moaned out loud, the vibration coursing through his body straight to his already aching penis. Naruto arched his back and met Sasuke's thrust, every inch of him burning with the need he had been keeping locked inside of him. Slowly, Sasuke moved his hand down and wrapped it around Naruto's erection. He began to jerk the blonde off with steady and firm strokes, and the flaxen-haired teen muffled his gasps by biting the prince's shoulder. "I want to hear you," Sasuke whispered into his ear. "Let me hear you, Naruto." Naruto threw his head back and wedged his lower lip between his teeth, refusing to give Sasuke the satisfaction. But when Sasuke started to thumb the swollen head of his leaking erection, he tightened his hold on the other shoulder and let out an erotic sound that made Sasuke's body burn hotter. He could feel the tremor of Naruto's body against his, as he too was having a hard time in keeping his own mule of pleasure while grinding his hips on Naruto's thigh. "I missed this, I missed you so much," Sasuke crooned in between pants into Naruto's ear. In response, Naruto coiled one of his legs around Sasuke's waist and plundered into his mouth, thrusting his tongue onto the prince's willing one. Sasuke clasped the blonde's bottom and lifted the other leg to wrap them around his waist, mouth still moving against each other as he patiently prepared his lover. Using a single finger, Sasuke teased the blonde's opening and prodded inside the tight heat. Years ago, when they had first started finding relief in each other, lube was a necessity, until both of them learned that slick preparation was not needed as long as Naruto was relaxed, ready and willing. The second and third finger followed shortly, probing the blonde's inner walls, searching for that nerve that would take Naruto into a world of ecstasy. "Oh, fuck," saw Sasuke. Naruto gasped, separating his mouth from the prince's. Sasuke smirked between nipping kisses, knowing that he had finally found it. I want you, inside," Naruto practically begged, sounding desperate. "Sasuke, inside me, now." Sasuke gripped him tighter, aligning himself to enter the blonde as gently as he could. His mind almost went blank in pleasure when he was engulfed by the tight heat that only Naruto could give him. He paused for a second in frustration, but still he waited for the blonde to adjust to his intrusion. "Be bastard, stop stalling. Move," Naruto half pleaded, half demanded. The relished feeling of being filled by Sasuke never failed to stop the usual pain that accompanied the act. His whole body only hummed in pleasure at the connection. He felt as though he was whole, immortal and invincible. Sasuke started moving, slowly at first, but the building pleasure made him thrust mercilessly, slamming himself against Naruto's ass. He pulled out and thrust back in, aiming for the blonde's prostrate. Naruto groaned, his eyes rolling back in pleasure as he rolled his hips, trying to bring Sasuke deeper inside of him. "Harder, fucking, harder, Sasuke, please." Sasuke obliged, not minding the word he always reprimanded the blonde for using, and quickened his pace, thrusting harder, much rougher than any other time they had done it. His other hand curled around Naruto's neglected member and started pumping it in time with his thrusts. He buried his face against the blonde's shoulder, sucking and biting at it, trying to hush his pleasured gasps. Naruto clutched tighter at his lover, grasping the dark hair as he closed his eyes and simply felt Sasuke's movements, going in and out of him. Nothing mattered for him at the moment, not the game they were supposed to watch, not Sasuke being a royalty nor his own lack of royal blood, not his guilty feelings about Sakura, not the whispering thought that Sasuke didn't love him, and not even the cooling water that touched their burning skin. Naruto, Sasuke groaned unconsciously. Yes, Naruto grunted, his hips meeting Sasuke's full thrusts. They've been doing it for some time, and usually they could last longer if they wanted to, but not this time. After months of separation, their bodies craved for the much-needed release. Both of them slowly felt the steady heightening of their bliss. Not yet, the prince moaned into Naruto's ear as he quickened his pace, involuntarily chanting the word, mine, mine, mine. And then he reached his climax, surging deep inside the blonde and releasing his seed, his body shuddering in pleasure unlike any other he had had with his fiancée. His hand tightened around Naruto's and the blonde cried in satisfaction as he too reached his own orgasm. Now, then and forever for. It was an unfortunate event that the team Naruto was rooting for lost, but still the glowing smile never left his lips. Even Sasuke appeared pleased with something that only the two of them knew of. If one would carefully observe them, they could assume that the two gorgeous young men were on a date, with the way they kept stealing glances with each other and that blissful radiance both of them were emitting. Even though their touches were accidental and their movements were casual, anyone could see the emotions swirling behind the blue eyes and the partially concealed desire in the taller of the two. Times like this made Sasuke cherish his lone bodyguard more than the dozens upon dozens of men in black suits that usually accompanied his parents. It made him feel normal, walking out of the soccer dome, grunting once in a while with his friends' chatter, pushing their way out of the mob of people, watching people cuss because of their loss and the likes. Unfortunately, even with his black hooded jacket, covering half of his lower face, Sasuke still attracted attention. Not because of his title but because of his looks that could not be hidden even beneath the clothes. It didn't help as well that Naruto's radiant smile emitted a friendly vibe within a 5-meter radius, adding interest among the people around them. The attention they were getting was not limited to any group, age, or gender. In fact, people as young as 5 years and as old as 70 years gaped at him. He would have enjoyed walking in a slow pace towards their waiting car if not for the half-dozen girls and boys. Clearly gays if the flamboyant way they act wasn't clue enough, stalking them from behind. He was positive that Naruto was aware of it since he, too, increased his steps, until they reached his black SLR McLaren Roadster Mercedes-Benz. Both of them climbed immediately inside the car, and Sasuke had it roaring on the road before anyone could follow them. Naruto's prattle echoed all throughout the trip until they reached a 5-star restaurant in the middle of the city. All of it was reserved for the prince and his companion, and the whole staff served at their best to please the powerful young monarch. Sasuke and Naruto filled their dinner time with conversation about politics, the game they just watched, some school stuff, a touch of Sasuke's relationship with Sakura, and a tiny detail about Naruto's mission that zeroed into their earlier fight. "I called Iruka in regards to your request," Sasuke started, looking up from his plate and meeting the blonde's curious gaze. "I said you can't leave, but it doesn't mean Karen can't fly here to meet you," he added. "Iruka confirmed that she's available and will be meeting you earlier next week. Is that fine with you?" Naruto stared quietly before a grateful smile blossomed on his youthful face. "Yeah, it is. Thank you, Sasuke." Sasuke waved a hand slightly in dismissal, not dwelling too much on how the young man in front of him could make him do unnecessary things. He was not sure if he was spoiling his bodyguard too much, or if it was because Naruto was already among the few people that he would gladly give everything for. The rest of the evening was spent driving quietly around the city until they reached the closest seaside where the water met the foot of a mountain, and the preserved area became a sanctuary to some wild animals that most of the affluent residents in the area owned. The salty smell of the cold air that ruffled their hair brushed against their noses as Sasuke parked the car beside a rail. The moon was full and the sky was clear. Sasuke's leather seat slowly declined halfway, his eyes closed as he heaved a deep breath. The lulling sound of the crickets and the waves crashing on the shore was soothing, that he almost forgot he had Naruto with him in the car. Naruto shifted on his seat, pulling one of his legs toward his chest as he stared at the enormous blue moon hanging above them. It was a sight to behold, and he must admit that he rarely enjoyed such scenes since he usually had pressing matters to think of than to just stop and admire the panoramic view. The only time he had recalled watching the moon was at least a year ago, when he grimly slit the throat of a woman, under the bluish ray of the moon, who had tried to set up the prince into marrying her daughter. Sasuke? HN? You're tired, aren't you? HN, why don't we go back already so you can sleep more comfortably on your bed? I doubt that. I doubt I could sleep. Is it really worse than before? Naruto asked, tilting his head to the side. I don't know. I can't remember. But I must admit your screams can really be frightening. I wish I could just remember, Sasuke murmured, eyes still closed, hands folded at the back of his head. Does Her Majesty Mikoto already know? I assume Sakura already reported it. And? I'm meeting Tsunade next week. That old hag? Naruto? The prince warned gently. I mean the royal doctor? She's bringing someone to help. She says she's going to bring a lady named Shion, a Celt's descent, for hypnotherapy. Lady Shion? I met her a few years ago. Really? Yeah, it was on a mission with Gaara and Tenten. She's the crown princess from that tiny nation on the north, and she's quite easy on the eye. HN. The youngest Uchiha replied with a tone of dismissal. But do all future kings and queens have attitude problems? Because she sure acts like a female version of you. TCH, I'll let that pass for now. Hey, but honestly, that place is strange. I saw few men at the country's capital when we were there. I heard it's a country where only females can rule. I heard that too. They said it had something to do with their, spiritual link with the other world or something as weird as that. The Celtic nation hundreds of years ago was considered a land of shaman women, so I guess it's true. Shaman? And you believe in such rubbish? History books rarely lie, moron. Rarely. And don't call me moron, bastard. HN. A comfortable silence settled over them once again. Naruto gripped his jacket closer to his body and huddled his legs around his arms, resting his chin on his knees. The air became colder as the night wore on. A soft mist started to gather around the trees entrenched on the sides of the sea, the shrill sound of a night bird resonating around them. Come here, Naruto, Sasuke mumbled. Where? Naruto asked, moving closer toward the prince. Closer. Why, Ak? The blonde's query was halted when Sasuke pulled him towards him and let him lay flat on top of the raven-haired royalty. Sasuke? He whispered softly. Naruto straddled Sasuke, adjusting his sprawled position from before, as the pale boy encircled his arms around the blonde. One hand on the small of his back, the other burrowed beneath soft golden hair, dragging Naruto closer to him. The blonde's cheek was pressed against Sasuke's shoulder and his arms folded, clutching the prince's jacket. This is nice, don't you think? Sasuke murmured quietly into his ear. Sasuke. I don't think. Are you comfortable? Yeah. Naruto answered, a small smile tugging on his lips as a pinkish hue tinted his face. Happy birthday, Naruto. Happy birthday to me indeed, Naruto thought. He hummed in response, his eyes slowly closing, enjoying the feeling of being in his prince's arms. 4. Sakura silently trotted inside the shadowy living room and into her fiancé's bedroom, and, to her surprise, she found the bed unoccupied even though it appeared to have been touched. Slowly, she removed her jacket, placing it gently on the enormous bed. Without thinking, she sauntered over to the door leading Sasuke's room to Naruto's. It was ajar and even without pushing it further, she could see the entire bed and its occupants. When she saw her fiancé lying peacefully on his stomach, at Naruto's bed next to the blonde, who in turn was sitting cross-legged with his laptop on his lap, she was hardly surprised. What astonished her, though, was seeing Sasuke breathing gently and he appeared to be in deep sleep. His right arm was enclosed snugly around the blonde's waist, his face burrowed at the side of Naruto's hip. The young assassin on the other hand seemed to be engrossed with what he was doing as his finger flew over the keyboard. The tapping sounds rising from it and the quiet hum of the security monitor were the only sounds drifting through the dark room. Before she could make another step forward, a pair of warm blue eyes locked onto hers. A small shy smile flashed on the flaxen-haired boy's face upon seeing her. Of course, she thought, Naruto probably knew she was there the moment she stepped inside the pad. Still, even after the years of knowing him, she could not get used to the idea of his ridiculous talent of perception. Sakura, Naruto greeted her. His voice was clear but whispery and sounded apologetic. "I'm sorry about Sasuke. He woke up from another nightmare and you're not around. I was surprised when he came to me. I just can't shove him out when he turns up dazed and frightened." Sakura shook her head as she slowly sauntered towards the bed, taking a seat beside Naruto. "It's okay, no need to apologize. I've never seen him fall asleep after a nightmare, not even when I'm with him. I'm glad he's sleeping well right now." Emerald eyes glanced softly at the sleeping man's face with an almost wistful look. "I'm a bit jealous, though. I mean, while I can't calm him with my presence, you could make him sleep like this." "Sakura, don't say that." Naruto frowned. "Maybe he just, well, we had a tiring night so maybe it had taken a toll on his body, that's why he managed to fall asleep at last. It just so happens that I'm here." The future queen shook her head once again, her face flushing a little. "Silly Naruto. You know too well how tiring our nights were." Naruto nodded, looking down at his laptop while he scratched the back of his neck. There was also a tinge of red on his cheeks. Yeah, I guess it's the feeling of being secure when he's around you. That even subconsciously he knows you will ward off anything bad that would come after him. I must admit it is something I cannot provide Sasuke. While I can love and take care of him, I cannot shelter him from the harm that only you can defend him from." "Sakura, shush," Sakura cut him off. "It's really fine, Naruto. I'm glad it's you who Sasuke turns to when I'm not around." Naruto clenched his hand on his lap as the guilt started to eat at him again. How could he betray his friend by sleeping with Sasuke earlier, even if only once? He had told himself that he wasn't going to betray his friendship with Sakura. He was going to honor what trust the girl had given him. But when Sasuke touched him, all rational thoughts seemed to fly out the window, and all he could think about was himself. To be selfish even once in a while, to get drunk with pleasure. When did he become a whore for love? His thoughts were interrupted when a soft small hand enveloped his, placing a small box on his palm. What's this? We met Sai earlier. Both he and Temari almost killed each other when he popped out of nowhere and startled her. Sakura explained, her eyes wide in amusement. He came here to give you this. From your brother, he says. When Naruto heard it, his face darkened a little. He gripped the small blue box tighter before opening it. Inside was their family heirloom. It was a rare blue diamond necklace clasped on animal leather. It had been handed down to them from generation to generation that tracing its root was already impossible. It's very beautiful, Sakura said in awe. I haven't seen any diamond like that before. Not even those very expensive ones in auctions. It must have cost a fortune. If not, you could probably buy a small country with that alone. It's a family heirloom, Naruto answered in a clipped tone as he hooked the necklace around his neck. Sakura nodded in understanding. I see. It compliments your eyes, Naruto. I never thought he'd hand this over to me, Naruto whispered, more to himself than to his company. And here's mine. Sakura trailed off, waiting until the blonde's attention was back on her. Honestly, I haven't gotten you anything. I don't know what to offer you. A car? A villa abroad? An all-expense luxury trip around the world? Jewelry? Yacht? She listed frustratingly. Those things are nonsense, and knowing you, you won't need them. I told you I'm not asking for anything. Hush, I don't want to hear that from you. Sakura scowled lightly, that's why I'm giving you this. Sakura handed him a typical brooch with a leaf emblem, a sign of royalty from their country. The same one Queen Mikoto had given her when Sasuke had chosen her to be his fiancée. I want you to have this, Naruto. I can't. How could you possibly give that? Your Highness, Naruto exclaimed, though his tone was still muffled to keep Sasuke from waking up. Sakura, Naruto, Sakura, the girl reiterated for the nth time. And I'm giving you this because I can and I want to. Be you. You can return it to me the moment you decide what favor I can do for you. You can ask me for anything, Naruto, anything at all, Sakura emphasized, glancing quickly to her future husband as she said it. But only one special favor and I'll grant it, without question, without a doubt, without hesitation. 3 years from now when you reach your age of reasoning I would ask you for that, so be sure it is something you really wanted, that you could live without. So don't waste it, understand? Naruto moved his head negatively. I can't, Sakura. I could not ask anything from you. Sakura grinned, fastening the brooch on his shirt. I'm not going to take no for an answer, she answered with blatant determination. 4. A few days later, Naruto found himself inside a royal suite of a five-star hotel. Karen, all poised and pretty in her expensive dress, was sitting opposite to him. Her ruby eyes were filled with confusion and her gaze was grim. "Why did you do it, milady? I never hide things from Sasuke, but this time I have to for you. You're a special friend, and I would not do anything to have you killed when I know I can protect you." "It's treason, Karen. To plan for Her Highness' death is treason, and you know that well." "So why?" The auburn-haired noble nibbles on her lower lip, her eyes darting around the room before meeting Naruto's gloomy ones. "For you," she softly replied. "For me? What do you mean for me?" the blonde asked, his voice becoming cold and his eyes narrowed into slits. He could not grasp as to how the impeded assassination against Sakura happened because of him. Karen folded her arms over her midsection, her head bowed as her gaze trailed the red carpet spread across the floor. "His Grace Orochimaru wanted you. He was so obsessed with your genes that he'd do anything to have you become his laboratory rat. It's impossible for him to have His Excellency, thus you being the sole Namikaze with an Uzumaki's blood still lingering in your veins is his only chance. He wanted to clone you, or rather, your exceptional talents, and build his own perfect soldier." Surprise was an understatement when he heard it, but he forced himself to be calm and listened attentively to the young patrician woman. "And the only thing that could prevent him from touching you was for you become the future king's consort. But with Lady Sakura in the way, he's free to do as he pleases." Naruto stared at his friend, wondering if Karen was telling him the truth or was just trying to reason out. He knew that Orochimaru was one of the most powerful monarchs their country had an alliance with. He was respected because of his advanced knowledge in terms of the technological development of his country. Human cloning was legal in his territory, and all scientists around the world dreamed to work under him. It was one of the few allied nations their country valued, and to expose something like that without concrete evidence could cause war. "What would make you think that once her ladyship was gone, Sasuke would make me his consort?" He grunted in displeasure. Karen looked up and answered him with obvious confidence. "Because His Majesty would not marry anyone else." Naruto snorted. "Don't assume too much, Karen. Sasuke might think that I'm his best friend, but he'll never see me beyond that." "Don't you love him?" The blonde glared at her so menacingly that anyone would run away in fear. "What I feel would not change anything. His Majesty will only marry Her Highness, and I would make sure no one will hinder it even if I had to become Orochimaru's guinea pig." "You can't possibly mean that, Naruto. I care for you. You're like my little brother already. And I would do whatever it takes to protect you. How could you demean my concern? After the death of my parents, you're the only one I consider family. I have risked everything for that information, and now His Grace would probably come after me." Karen cried out, lunging toward the startled blonde, engulfing him in a hug. Naruto's cold demeanor softened as he buried his head on Karen's shoulder. "No need to be afraid. I can take care of myself if that's what you're scared of. You are belittling me too much. I'm scared, Naruto. I don't want to lose you." The woman sobbed into his shoulder, her hands tightening around him. "I'll be all right, and you will be too. I promise," Naruto soothingly whispered. "And I always keep my promises, right?" Karen nodded, though she refused to let the young man go. She wasn't sure anymore if she dreaded Naruto's death or the horror of what Orochimaru would do once he caught her. 4. This is Princess Shion, Your Majesty. She'll do the hypnosis, as has been approved by your mother and father, Tsunade, a tall, lovely and very voluptuous middle-aged woman stated. She was a well-known and respected doctor around the world and was also the Uchiha's royal medic head. She was smart, with a sharp tongue, and she was afraid of almost no one. Sasuke took the extended hand of the young girl around his age with long golden hair and delicate features. He slightly touched his lips on her hand as a polite greeting for someone with almost similar stature as his. The princess was every bit as comely as Naruto had said, and as proud-looking as any royalty should. "I'm pleased to meet you, milady. The pleasure is all mine, Your Majesty. At last, I finally meet the infamous prince." There were few people inside the private room. Besides Sakura and Temari, who had accompanied him, was the princess's personal assistant, Taruho, and then there was Tsunade. Outside, a few dozen guards were surrounding the building, all for the princess's protection. "So, shall we proceed?" Tsunade asked, leading them inside the smaller room, where a small reclining chair stood at one corner and a comfortable lounge sat on the other side. There was soft instrumental music playing in the background, and the lights were mellower than that in the receiving area. The room temperature was neither cold nor hot, and the calming smell of lavender had been sprayed into the air. "Your Majesty, please take a seat on the chair and try to relax," the doctor instructed. "As for the rest, except the princess, please refrain from making any sound." Sakura and Tamari nodded, making themselves comfortable on the settee. Once everyone was settled, Shion walked casually toward the prince, who was sitting quietly on a Victorian chaise. His absurdly gorgeous face was distracting, and fortunately for her, she already had her eyes set on a certain smiling blonde she had met years ago. "I was looking forward to see Naruto with you, Your Majesty," Shion started, making small talk to ease the prince into following her command later on. "He's needed somewhere," Sasuke answered casually. "I guess I'll see him later then." Shion pressed a smile on her face, taking note that chatting with someone like the prince would surely put a stress on what they were supposed to do. She decided to forego the supposedly pleasant chat and went straight to business. "Are you sure you want to go under this, Sasuke?" she asked. "Can I call you Sasuke?" "Yes, I'm sure, and I suppose you could call me that for now." "How are you sure? I need to know how willing you are to go through this." Sasuke gave her a flat look before uttering, "I'm anxious, is that enough?" "I need for you to trust me then, Sasuke," Shion said softly with her sweet melodious voice. "I could do that. Is there anything, just a tiny thing you remember from your dream?" The girl coaxed. There was. Sasuke took a deep breath, but his indifferent facade didn't change. There was blood everywhere. Her face was bland and devoid of any emotion, but her voice was gentle and calm. "Can you please close your eyes for me, Sasuke?" Sasuke obeyed, closing his eyes as was instructed. "I'm going to count down backwards, from 100 to 0, okay?" The prince nodded in response. 100, 99, 98, 97. Shion tapped her finger on the wooden table beside her for every second she counted. 81. Sasuke, you'll be getting sleepier and sleepier for every tap I make. 80, 79. You're getting more tired, Sasuke, more tired. When she reached 0, the prince's breathing became soft, and his face relaxed. "Sasuke, are you with me?" "Yes. Where are you? Please describe where you are." I'm nowhere. Everything is black. I can't even see my hand." "Good. Imagine yourself on a meadow, with wild flowers around you and the sky is clear with few white clouds in the sky. You feel relaxed and content? How are you feeling now?" "I feel secure and calm." "Very good. Now you see that single red rose on the middle of the field? I want you to pick it. Are you done?" "Yes. Look at the red petal of the rose and I want you to go back further and further into your mind, Sasuke, further and further until you see the same red color on your hand." Sasuke started to tremble and shiver on his chair, his hand clenching on his side and his skin paler than usual. No. Further and further, Sasuke, listen to me, further and further until you see it." No. Stop it, no." Shion frowned but firmly continued. "You're not going to stop traveling until you see it, Sasuke. Further and further. No. Stop it. No. Please. No." Sasuke screamed. His voice resonated inside the whole room, startling the spectators inside. The prince's struggling body stopped and he settled once again into a deep sleep. "Sasuke, can you hear me?" Shion asked softly, but she received no response. "Sasuke? Answer me if you can hear me." There was still no response. "I want you to answer me, Sasuke. Try to move your body if you could." "Nothing, Your Majesty?" But the prince continued slumbering, not showing any signs that he could hear her. He felt his body, or rather his soul, float until he found himself at the back of a black massive destrier horse, with a human body cuddled on his arm. Sasuke Uchiha, the most powerful emperor of the East, glanced behind him. His cold onyx eyes scoured his troop on halt at his rear. There were hundreds of imperial elite knights, thousands of cavaliers and thousands more of foot soldiers and archers waiting for his next instruction. All of them looked weary from the recent war they won, but besides from a minor injuries they had, none of them died on the battlefield. Their energy might have been drained, but everyone were still thankful for coming back home alive. "Your Majesty, how's His Highness doing?" someone asked. Sasuke returned his gaze back in front of him. A lord knight from the family of Hyuga sauntered his own horse up beside him. Neji's aristocratic feature was grim, as he inspected Sasuke's unmoving load. Sasuke glimpsed slightly on the bundle around his arm. A very pale-faced young man was leaning on his chest, eyes closed and breathing so soft, one would think he's dead. Bright golden hair falls on the deathly beauteous face of Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze, the emperor's longtime fiancé and the empire's future emperor's consort. Not good, Sasuke answered in clipped tone, his eyes narrowed in displeasure. Where the hell are they? Lord Sabaku and Inuzuka are still asking for permission to be entertained, Your Majesty. Neji calmly retorts, I have no idea why we need consent from a baron when I could just cease it seeing this land is still under my jurisdiction. Sasuke impatiently replied, his voice deep and almost growling. There's no harm to show your generous side, Your Majesty, especially to this destitute noble. Being generous won't make Naruto feel any better, will it? The emperor hissed bitterly to one of his general. Instead of coming back with a retort, Neji kept his comment to himself, knowing too well that a dispute will happen when one argued with their young emperor. His gifted vision once again observed the unconscious blonde man, noting how little energy was left inside his body. Too inadequate, that was barely enough to sustain his life force, he thought. Having Naruto and Uzumaki Namikaze on their side surely guaranteed success on whatever skirmish they fought. Having a mixed blood of an Uzumaki's mystical race and that of Namikaze, whose bloodline contains Magikos 5 times the amount of any ordinary elemental, made Naruto and his elder brother Kyuubi a formidable foe in a battlefield. Their stamina was sustainable, that they can last long weak hard combat without a break and could summon tremendous elemental attack repeatedly at the same time. Except that Kyuubi's capabilities were strongly used for offensive attack, as he can bid the 4 potent elements into his will without exerting too much of an effort. Naruto, though, required long complicated chants or symbol to beckon an impressive force, as his Magikos was far more complicated, seeing he leans more on the quintessence known as Aether, the one that was pure essence and could solicit energy from any life. As well as that he couldn't still control it properly, what's with his young age. The last campaign one was one of the biggest battle Neji had seen, where almost half of the Earthian nations unite to overthrow the Fire's jurisdiction over their country. It would have been a bloody end at both sides, if not for Naruto's endurance to shield all of them. Instead of joining the assault, the youngest Namikaze decided to aid by enclosing them with magical Scudum Fidei, Shield of Faith, wherein no physical or magical attack could touch them. To blanket thousands of fire army, even half an hour was strenuous enough for an experienced Scudumer or those whose element were concentrated for protection. What of when it was extended from dawn until dusk? To say that the Namikaze family has gained a few thousand more of loyal followers was an understatement at the moment. Lord Hyuga was sure, most if not all of the soldiers would lay their life for the future emperor's consort if needed be. Although Naruto was commended for the unscathed victory, the battling prowess of the young Emperor Uchiha was surely the one that brought their enemies down. Sasuke were among the very few who could match Kyuubi when it comes to sword fight, and fewest among the Uchihas who could manipulate the Atra Incendium or the black fire from hell that can destroy anything, even a powerful Magikos attack. Since the Emperor's Magikos were from subconscious mind of controlling the people through the Uchiha's Sharingan eyes, he can call upon the black fire, Kagutsuchi, when he heightened his Sharingan into a Mangekyo Sharingan, which he rarely used because it erodes his eyesight. But since the battle became difficult, Sasuke was forced to use it for hours, almost losing his eyesight, if not for his fiancée immediate rescue. The last of Naruto's spirit was used to summon an Aether spirit to restore the Emperor's eye into a perfect condition, resulting to his death-like state at the moment. The sound of galloping horses coming their way roused Neji from his deep thoughts. Looking up, he saw the distinctly familiar auburn hair of Gaara Sabaku, the crown prince from the Sand Kingdom, and that of the animal summoner Sir Kiba of Inuzuka's. Permission has been granted, Your Majesty, Gaara promptly reported once they reached them. Though he was informing the Emperor, his sea-green eyes were trailing Naruto's slack figure. The notorious family of Sabaku from the Kingdom of Sand was the closest ally of the Namikazes. If, and only if, everyone withdraw their support from the Namikazes, the Sand would likely stand with them until the end. I don't need a mere baron's permission, Sasuke snorted in distaste before positioning his fiancée more comfortably in front of him. "How's Naruto?" Kiba butted in, his wild mahogany hair sticking out from his head. Triangular red tattoos dress his cheeks, a symbol of being a fully grown hunter given to their family. The Inuzukas could beckon any neutral animals into their command, but they prefer using hounds and wolves during battle. The Emperor's right brow twitched from Kiba's uncouth behavior, from calling his superior familiarly with first name. "He won't be fine if we don't sat his depleting energy," Neji replied, almost annoyingly. "We ride." The raven-haired emperor commanded the rest of his general relay the command to their troops as they proceeded slowly to their temporary haven for the night. 5. With bored gaze, Shikamaru inspect the three-story stone manor behind the tall stone wall before them. An ill-dressed man came running, his head bowed to take the emperor's horse rein. Sasuke dismounted and carefully carried Naruto on his arm and walked regally towards the open gate of the wall as though he owned the place. On second thought, technically he does. Other servants came rushing, taking the other knight's horses and leading it inside the stable. Kiba and Shino were then ordered to take charge of the army, making sure they're comfortably camped in during the night. While the rest of the noble in ranks were ushered inside the Haruno's household, with the Haruno lord trailing behind them, very delighted and honored, as he very well should be. Solemn-looking servants stood inside waiting to take their cloaks and other items. Shikamaru decided that even though the manor was far from the usual luxurious Uchiha castle or that of his family's own family, the place was livable. The walls were paneled with silver oak and everywhere there was color. The plaster above the panels was painted with landscape of people in a meadow. There were colorful and new tapestries hanging on the walls, and on the tables were gleaming porcelain plates and golden goblets. As they made their way upstairs where Baron Haruno led the scowling-faced monarch, the hallway was filled with carved pieces of furniture, all looking new that he somewhat doubted at the moment that the said landowner was broke. Before he could inspect any further, the old man opened a double oak door that appears to be the master chamber where Sasuke strode inside without uttering a word. The room was large with tall ceilings. The walls were paneled with beautiful carved oak, the plaster were painted with animal designs. The furniture, the window seats and the wide four-posted bed were draped with brilliant color silks and velvety soft cushion. All the materials were embroidered with silver and gold thread. The whole room screech of royalty, that most small estate owner baron could not afford. "Pretty impressive," Shikamaru muttered under his breath. "Thank you, my lord. 'Tis the result of my two daughter-in-law's dowry." The old baron answered, pleased with himself. Shikamaru nodded dismissively, focusing more of his attention to his emperor and his fiancée. Sasuke gently laid the young elemental at the bed, after the maids drew the canopy bed curtain to the side. Just then, the door opened and two men came in bearing a big, deep wooden tub. The men wore loose wool tunic to their knees belted at the waist, fading dark woolen trousers and leather shoes. Behind the men came four scullery maids bearing buckets of steaming hot water. They wore simple, long wool skirts, tight bodices, and little caps on their heads. They left politely after their task. When the tub was half full of steaming water, the waiting maids started to undress the sleeping young lord that took the emperor by surprise. "What in the name of Konoha are you doing?" Sasuke glared, snarling at the three young maiden who quickly stepped back from Naruto, though their eyes were still gaping at the blonde monarch exposed toned chest since his orange lace-up faux suede vest and white swordsman shirt had been untied up to his stomach. His Highness need to be you undress your Majesty for the bee bath. One of the handmaidens replied, her voice so low and quivering it was almost a whisper. "I'm afraid you are not allowed to touch His Highness over familiarly. I'm pretty sure you should have known this by now." Neji informed the shuddering maidens, "Iruka would take care of that. You can leave now." "Why yes my lord." The three chorus, curtsy and run off the room immediately. "I apologize for their impudence your majesty, they're the newest maidservant of my daughter, and she's still training and teaching them." Baron Haruno quickly said, his wrinkled face paled when the young emperor glared disapprovingly at him. "It would be pleasant if you could lead us to your stateroom baron, if you have one, while Iruka washes Prince Naruto," Shikamaru suggested when Naruto's personal vassal came in. Iruka was Lord Minato's young vassal before and continued being his youngest son groom. He was an early middle-age elemental, loyal to a fault and very kind. Besides Naruto's first family, Iruka was the sole outsider that Sasuke allowed to touch his fiancée. True that the raven-haired emperor rebuffs any rumor about an amorous feeling he had with his closest companion, but he's very possessive when it comes to anything that he believes was his. "Call us when you're done," Sasuke instructed the older man before leaving the room. The rest of his officials take out after him, all looking for a sumptuous dinner and a peaceful rest. 5. After undressing his young charge and immersing him in the water, Iruka scrubbed the oblivious boy off dust and repugnant dirt that had accumulated since the war started. Since the young noble lord had reached his age of reasoning, Naruto had bathed himself alone. The last time Iruka remembered helping the boy to take a bath was inside the palace royal wash pool when they returned after 5 years away from Konoha. Naruto mischievously used his unstable elemental control at that time, resulting to flood the alcove with bubbles from his personal scented soap. It took half a day for the servant to tidy up the place before anyone could use it. Elementals like them, especially as powerful as the Namikaze, often does not smell even for weeks without bath. Subconsciously the magicos inside their body ward off any elements that would sully them. The same way that the elves and fairies across the continent of Consolare balanced themselves with nature. But since Naruto was almost depleted with that energy, the unique body purification distinctive to their race vanishes. Bathed, Iruka clothed his charge with fine negligee camiscia, then covering half of his body with the golden silk comforter. The young man's face was so pale that Iruka could no longer trace the beautiful peachy tan skin of Naruto. He knew how the young noble had fallen deep with his imperial majesty. He watched how their bond formed, that only Naruto, from his usual ignorant nature, was surprisingly the first one to acknowledge it. Iruka had no idea as to what precedent did the young emperor perceive gender, to stop from loving someone intimately. He was sure that the former emperor and empress had inculcated it to their sons that there's no such thing as duality to their world as compared to the humans from another continent. And when Naruto told him that Sasuke wanted to have an heir, he could somewhat comprehend that Sasuke making his parent as his role model for his own future. His deep contemplation was interrupted when Naruto's breathing became harsh and his skin started to turn blue. Iruka's eyes widened with fear and immediately left the room and run for help. 5. The Haruno's household had an unusually odd number of staterooms for their class. The lord of the house led them at the center of the facade where the largest and the most lavish stateroom were located. It was splendidly decorated by finest work of arts and furniture. Purple silk embroidered by silver and gold dresses the Chesterfield and fainting couch. The grand room was very notable that Lord Haruno pleased his very distinguished guests. Once settled, the royal board members courteously introduced themselves one by one for the sake of the villa's master. From the Lord Knight Hyuga and Prince Sabaku, the royal war strategist Shikamaru Nara, down to the smiling advisor Kakashi Hitaki. Sasuke just watched the old man amusedly as he made a fool of himself while he tries to please them. But his uninterested mood diminished when a lovely young woman entered the room. Her long and straight very light auburn hair nearly the color of salmon was pulled up in a ponytail above her head, and instead of the usual noblewoman clothing, she was clad with a white huntress tunic, and tight black riding pants and boots, a bow at her hands. Her breathing was haggard when she launched the room. Almond-shaped green eyes settled to Lord Haruno, and after a while her gaze traveled at them, and when recognition dawned upon her, she quickly kneeled down on one leg, bowing her head down. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, for my intrusion. I was worried about my father when I saw the thousands of soldiers camping at our land and I know my excuse is unreasonable and my impudence so unbecoming for a lady of my stature for just barging in without. Hush with your prattle, woman, you're giving me headache. Gaara admonished, his attractive face was piercing with annoyance. Sasuke, with one brow raised, glanced to one of his Lord Knight, a touch of delight gleaming at his eyes from Gaara's usual foul mood. No need to frighten the lady, Gaara. He chided and then stares back at the still stooping maiden. At ease, the emperor ordered, you can raise now. The baron's daughter rose up, her eyes not meeting any of the higher echelon's aristocrats as she went and settled herself beside her father. Your Majesty, this is my youngest and only daughter, Sakura. Please forgive her, guys, as she loves to go hunting by her own when bored. 'Tis my problem to find her a suitable man to marry, as she is free-spirited and fights with sword better than most of my soldier." Lord Haruno clarifies. Gaara scowled, standing up from his seat and withdrawing his sharp sword. "May I request a small skirmish then to appraise her skill?" Lord Haruno's eye widened in fear, unconsciously grabbing his daughter's own trembling hands. I absolutely not meant it that way, my milord." Shikamaru sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose in irritation with the unnecessary killing intent Gaara was giving. He gave Sasuke a glance to seek help, seeing Gaara normally don't listen to any of them, sometimes even with Sasuke unless Naruto told him so. "There's no need for you to engage into a duel, Gaara. You're far beyond the lady's skill, and she'll most likely die after a minute or two with your presence alone." A jovial voice cut in. Gaara glared hard towards the royal advisor, whose half of his lower face was covered with a thin black cloth and one of his eyes enclosed with a patch. "I'm not just going to let anyone demean any soldiers, especially comparing them with a puny woman." Very well, Kakashi replied, unruffled with the deathly stare coming from the red-haired elemental. "But there's no need for a gentleman like yourself to propose a duel against a lady, Where's chivalry, my lord knight? If I may say so, you seem to hold a grudge against our host daughter. Perhaps you have met her before?" Sheathing his sword back to his scabbard, Gaara settled back to his seat with an icy retort. "Never have I laid eyes on her in my entire life, but now, nevertheless, my instinct never fails me when a certain being would cause chaos in unforeseeable future." Emerald green eyes swiftly look up due to unneeded abhorrence against her, just in time to be met by the onyx black orb of the Emperor. She should never look upon her Emperor like equal, but what she saw at those smoldering eyes were fascination that, through her knowledge, never had the Emperor given to any people he met. The hidden stare against the hair falling over his incredibly handsome face made her breathless. She could feel her face heating up and her heart pounding loudly against her chest. She was not going to deny herself that she felt ridiculously pleased with herself for catching the eye of the powerful, gorgeous Emperor when the said Emperor never showed interest to any high-ranking aristocratic ladies or gentlemen. And that she was certain that she's very much interested with him as well, not because of his rank, but more of that fact that there's something about him that intrigues her, even though he's a man that Sakura not once entertained a thought of being attracted with. Before, she thought she'll most likely end with a lady like herself, as she finds man obviously weak and annoying, but now she was pretty sure she had found the man she fancied. Except that, the Imperial Emperor was engaged to be married to a very influential monarch of Uzumaki Namikaze royalty. Sakura never thought earlier that she'll be able to glimpse the arrayed of high aristocrat figure ruling the empire sitting before her now, nor she had dreamed of being around the Emperor himself, as their connection as noble was very poor to even grant them entrance to a royal ball. Hence, seeing the display of the fine-looking, powerful lord overwhelmed her, and now the only thing she desired was to get more of the Emperor's interest and find out how close their mutual attraction will take them. But perhaps knowing His Majesty's fiancé would be a better move, for she never dreams to be involved in just a simple affair, nor breaking up the royal couple who were in love. She was not suicidal by nature, and surely she'll never do a thing that would annihilate her family when the Uzumaki Namikaze carry their rage on them. Their stealing glances, though, was not unseen by the Emperor's court. Neji clacked his tongue in displeasure. Shikamaru muttered his favorite, troublesome, expression. Kakashi kept his face hidden in his favorite book, and Gaara glared daggers to the two involved with the deed. The silent, heavy atmosphere was broken when Iruka scuttled inside the room, face pale and wordings jumble. When Neji attempted to calm him, the vassal rushed down at Sasuke's feet and cried, tagging the Emperor's black lace-up leg pants and pleading incoherently. The Emperor stooped down, pulling the smaller man up to his feet. "Stand up, Iruka, and compose yourself. Your Majesty, I beg you." Iruka wept, "Please save Naruto's life. Please, don't let him die. Please, relax, Iruka, breath." Kakashi soothingly said, "Naruto, His Highness, dying, save him. I pled you for his life." And before anyone could voice out anything anymore, a certain red-haired Night Lord was already walking fast out of the stateroom, a rare anxious look fitted on his face. 5. His energy is almost completely depleted, Your Majesty. Neji replied, though his voice sounded calm, there was a touch of panic in there. His Byakugan activated while holding the convulsing blonde royalty on the bed. He needs someone to share their life source with him at the moment until we can find a means to satiate his body with enough magicos to stabilize him. If not, I'm afraid His Highness is going to die. Sasuke's always apathetic demeanor changed. His pale complexion became 2 shades lighter than usual as the notion of living without his fiancée the rest of his life traumatized him in a way he could not understand. It's like a part of him wanted to die as well, and that feeling that washed over him made him more confounded. Not because he cared less, but because the dread he was feeling was accompanied by emotion he could not identify with. "Your Majesty," Neji called out, "what are we going to do? I'm sure every one of our soldier would volunteer to help if. Don't you dare suggest that I just let anyone do that to him." Sasuke growled. "Would you rather let him die then, Sasuke?" Kakashi asked sympathetically. Being the emperor's tutor since child had given him the right to call the raven-haired monarch by his first name. "Because I'm sure even though you're strong enough to share your spirit with your fiancé, you won't do it right." Sasuke looked fiercely to the older man then bitterly replied, "You or anyone else has no right to assume that I abhor touching Naruto. I may not love him like he does with me, but I'm perfectly sure I would do anything at all to save him. If I could extend my remaining spirit just to save his life, I would. He means more to me than any of you combined, so shut the hell up." Kakashi narrowed his gaze, knowing too well that it might be true that Sasuke would do it, but on the other hand he will only perform such act if he was absolutely sure there was no possible way to save the Naruto. He had seen Sasuke's prejudice when it comes to his fiancé, that while he accepts that both male marries and fall in love in and outside of his jurisdiction, he could not give the two of them a chance. Kakashi was very sure that what the emperor was feeling for the youngest Namikaze ran deeper than a brother's bond as Sasuke always deemed. He somewhat concluded that Sasuke was subconsciously afraid of something if he pursue it, and whatever it was, if continuously denied would put the two of them into more heartache and presumably on the brink of sanity. "I don't think this is something we need to discuss in front," Shikamaru started. But his words died down when Gaara purposely strode besides the bed, tags Neji out of the way, then gently pulls the blonde monarch into a sitting position and meet the bluish lips halfway. The entire bed chamber quieted, everyone present was too astounded to move or make a sound as the auburn-haired aristocrat continues to press his lips against the sleeping young man. His red cape falling on his shoulder as he titled the smaller boy's face to deepen the kiss. "Get the hell away from him, Sabaku, before I behead you," Sasuke uttered darkly, his face deadly as the tilt of his sword was poised on the other's neck. "I apologize, Your Majesty, but His Highness could not anymore wait for your decision. If Lord Gaara terminates this connection, His Highness Naruto would die," Neji explains levelly. While Shikamaru ushered the Baron and his daughter out of the room, Sasuke deepened his thrust on Gaara's neck where it grazes and a drop of blood trickled down on his dark green surcoat. A pair of cold aquamarine eyes open, meeting the dagger gaze coming from Sasuke. But instead of wrenching himself from Naruto, he smirked at the Emperor as if taunting him, while continuously moving his mouth against a pair of soft now pink ones. Gaara's other arm hooped around the blonde's waist pulling him closer to his chest, the collar of Naruto's chemise falling down to his shoulder showing a soft smooth skin. Sasuke growled and would have struck Gaara if not for the strong arms of Kakashi holding him off from behind. "Let go of me, Kakashi. You kill Gaara, and you'll kill Naruto as well. And you won't like that, will you?" Kakashi said calmly, removing his hold from the Emperor. "And Gaara, don't do something unnecessary. I don't think Naruto will appreciate it once he woke up. Lord Sabaku will temporarily allow the flow of energy from his body to Prince Naruto to stabilize his condition, but it doesn't mean that he was transmitting any of his spirit to fill Lord Namikaze's demand. Right now, we need Lady Karen from Kusagakure for her abilities to heal bite. Her energy might not be enough, but Gaara can give his extra life force to alleviate His Highness' need." Neji explained further, standing a little aloofly at one corner of the bed, his eyes monitoring the change of force inside the youngest monarch. Sasuke slowly retracted his sword, turning his back away from the scene that he loathed. His fist clenched at his side. "How long will it take to bring her here?" he asks more in control this time. "A week or two with a horse, 2 hours or less with Ryule," Shikamaru answered. "Go and tell Kiba to summon the fastest Ryule he can call upon and bring Karen to me," Sasuke commanded severely. Shikamaru nodded, leaving the room with a toss to his own gray cape. 5. Sasuke bore his gaze from the balcony, outside where hundreds of campfires were burning and 1,000 more sleeping tents were standing. At the horizon where dark and light met, he could see the vanishing Ryule where Kiba was probably riding. The giant dragon-like eagle was the fastest air beast of the land, and dangerous to anyone who had no idea how to deal with it. Even though he changed into a finely woven white shirt underneath a black doublet embroidered with gold and silver, it wasn't enough to cover him from the biting cold of the weather. He left his cloak inside as he could no longer stand watching his fiancée being kissed by another man. Not that he desired to be the one doing the act, it was just that he almost never shared what was his. "Permission to join you, Your Majesty," a soft voice called him from behind. Slightly turning around, Sasuke was met by a well-dressed Sakura. She now looked more of a lady than a vagabond from the forest. Her moss-green gown complements her eyes well. It was snugly fit, lining the perfect curve of her body. The bodice were squared, displaying her smooth, well-endowed upper chest. The neck and the hem of the gown were embroidered by golden thread. The sleeve of her dress was tied at the upper arm and was very long and full below the elbow, almost touching the ground. The blio was tightly laced from the hips, right up the body and through the underarm to the upper arm that caused distinctive pleats on the full skirt. A golden belt was tied loosely on her hips to emphasize its roundness. A soft look he rarely showed settled on the usual standoffish face of the emperor. Permission granted. Sakura timidly walked up beside Sasuke, grasping her long plaited hair on her shoulder. The reddish hue from the sky landed at their face, giving off a romantic background. "Can I ask for a permission to speak freely again, Your Majesty?" Sakura asks bravely. Her mouth was stretched with full smile, showing a perfect set of white teeth, making her lovely face more charming. "I suppose I could allow that for now," Sasuke riposted thoughtfully. "Thank you, my lord," Sakura responded. "Is there something you need to ask me? Are you fine now, Your Majesty?" The girl curiously asked. "Lord Sabaku's action earlier is beyond impudence, I believe." Sasuke eyed her for a moment, contemplating of whether he should expose his private life to her. "I guess I should not be surprised, seeing most of those people who have been around Naruto are all a little in love with him. And I suppose I could not hold grudge against Gaara when he's one of my fiancé's closest friends and that I'm aware how deeply he loves with him." "In love?" Sakura gasped. "And you're fine with this, Your Majesty?" Sasuke snorted, turning back to the camping field. "I believe you heard what I said earlier." Sakura trailed her gaze on the ground, pursing her lips. "A forced engagement? You don't foresee yourself marrying His Highness? If you say that everyone he comes close to become a little in love with him, can I ask why you are not?" Sasuke folded his arms together and leaned on the stone railing. "I'm not saying I could not see myself marrying him. In fact, I could not envision anyone else standing beside me my whole life, while ruling the empire, than him. It's not because of the fear that his family and the powerful army they hold would stop supporting the empire, nor that they would raise a war against us. It's just that, I wanted a family, an heir probably." "You don't love him then?" Sakura insisted. "I cared about him deeply, so much that, I don't love him, you see. I'm." Sasuke trailed off, his eyebrow burrows into thinking. He was positive he didn't love Naruto because there's something beyond that in regards of what he's feeling over the blonde. "If you wanted an heir, then how could you marry him? Is it because it was stated so? Agreed upon?" Sakura asks in confusion. "What I understand, Your Majesty, is that you care very deeply for His Highness, but the only thing that keeps you from fully delving into that feeling was because he can't give you an heir?" "No, or was it because he's a man?" Sasuke bit his inner cheek with that question. He was past with being stubborn in regards with gender. He already came into understanding long ago that both males can be together. What he couldn't comprehend though was why he was afraid of being intimate with Naruto when he had all the intention, with or without heir, to marry him in the future. Was it because he still wanted an heir, or was it more to experience a woman before succumbing into his denials? Honestly, His Highness is very attractive. His features are more of a boy than a grown man. Very innocent to a point one would thought he was decades younger than he already was. But I hear he's quite stubborn and a bit of a brat, is that correct, Your Majesty? Sakura asks once again when her last question was ignored. Naruto's childish, loud, disobedient and irritating, that's true. ungraceful at times and would join peasants' table when eating outside the palace. He's boyish and he lacks emotional restraint, always fighting for what he believes in. That's him, alright, doesn't sound too bad, Sakura compliments sincerely. Yes, I deduce that personality made him who he is. Sakura glanced warily to the emperor, wondering if he's not really in love with his fiancée as he say he was. What flair you have, if I may ask? Sasuke added, changing the topic instantly. Healing. But I can't find an excellent teacher to help me at the moment. It's hard to improve when no one's around to help me. The lady of the house answered shyly. Do you want to come with us then to train? Sasuke offered generously. Is that fine, your majesty? I don't think I'm the emperor, am I not? You could be Lady Tsunade's apprentice if you want. Sakura's eye widened at the said name. Lady Tsunade was the greatest healer of all the lands. Her influence and popularity rivaled that of the empress, and to work under her was a dream come true. I thank you, your majesty. You don't know how happy you made me. Sakura shouted with joy, completely forgetting herself as she enfolded the young raven-haired monarch into a hug. Sasuke's short surprise ended after a while when he got a whiff of that sweet womanly smell coming from the girl. With a faint smile, he settled his arms around her small waist and draws her small soft body closer to his. Unknowingly, an owner of a bluish and green eye, respectively, and reddish-brown hair was watching them behind the shadow. A look of disapproval marring her face, when she turned away. The light of the nearby torch caught her olive-color skin and her distinguishable white medic surcoats on top of her velvet maroon gown. Her teeth were clenched and her eyes near slit with the anger that started to bubble within her. I'll make your life a living hell, you whore, she whispered resentfully to the wind. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.